Carol and I have been married for 16 mostly wonderful years. We have a charming 14-year-old daughter named Jenny. We initially wanted another child, but Carol immediately started taking birth control pills, and we both threw ourselves into work. We were so happy with Jenny that over time we realized we didn't need another child. I love my family very much and thought we had created a loving marriage and close relationship. I have always felt lucky to have an intelligent and attractive wife. But sometimes I wondered if having such a beautiful wife would lead to some difficulties. I was always surprised and pleased that such a beautiful woman decided to marry an ordinary guy like me. When I raised this question, Carol laughed. "I guess I just felt sorry for you, Mark. You looked so sad when I first met you that I just had to cheer you up." "Well, you handled it great," I smiled back. "After I met you, I never felt sad again. I love you." "I love you too, Mark." This playful exchange always made us both laugh. But lately, I've started to think seriously about her answer. The thing is, she was right. I was really depressed when I met Carol. I just broke up with my college girlfriend. Yes, I was abandoned. I cared about her very much. When she decided to end the relationship, I was deeply depressed. We were together for 3 years, and the breakup hit me hard. Later, I found out that she met another guy from her hometown and wanted to build a relationship with him. There was no cheating, and she always said that she had fun with me when we were together. But she was moving out of the area soon and didn't want to pursue a long-distance relationship. She had actually met this guy a couple of months earlier during a break from her classes. She said they didn't have sex, but she was interested and decided to end the relationship before cheating on me. I think I respected her for her honesty, even though it still hurt. Before I met Carol, I graduated from college with an accounting degree, immediately got a job, and began my career as a bachelor. I've dated a few girls, but I've never met one that I became deeply attached to. My sex life was irregular. None of the women at work attracted me. I was hanging out with friends after work. But my career was my life, and after a couple of years I was making pretty good money. I met my future wife by chance. I was invited to a friend's party. My friend Jim Simpson, whom I met as a student, and his wife Martha tried several times to arrange for me to meet suitable girls. It was at one of these parties that I met Carol. We were introduced to each other at a party, and we immediately hit it off. Carol is a tall, vivacious natural blonde with a beautiful face and a slim but curvy figure. Jim pointed to her and said that she, like me, had recently broken up with her boyfriend and was now single. She was so beautiful that it was hard for me to believe it. Why would any reasonable guy leave such a beautiful woman? Carol was nice and told me that she was an art student and would be graduating soon. She was not only beautiful and smart, but also funny, sociable, and very easy to talk to. We talked for almost the entire party. She agreed to meet me the next week, and we started dating. Soon we had sex, and we became a couple. At the beginning, Carol made it clear that she was still seeing other guys. But after a few months, we became an exclusive couple. At least I did. It took her a little longer before I realized that she only had eyes for me. When I met Carol, I was already a certified accountant and established in my career. I think the fact that I made good money and could afford to take Carol to places her previous boyfriends never could played a major role in her decision to marry me. I knew it was important for her to be financially stable, and when I showed her my new home, my sports car, and took her to nice restaurants, she was impressed. I'd like to think she was attracted to my looks and charm. But to be honest, I knew that I looked only average and rather reserved, certainly not like a macho man. I believe she enjoyed our sex. I definitely enjoyed it. I learned that she was much more sexually experienced than me and had dated a lot of guys before me. In my mind, once we got married, all those guys were a thing of the past. She told me that they were in the past, that she only loved me. I fully accepted her words and soon after asked her to marry me. When she agreed, it was the happiest day of my life. Jim Simpson has been a friend of mine for many years. We played on the same sports teams and hung out together. We lived in the same city and met regularly for drinks and chat. At that time, Jim was married. But when his marriage to Martha began to fail, I tried to help him get through the divorce. Later, I found out that he cheated on Martha, and she found out about it. She hired a hotshot lawyer and bilked my best friend completely. Jim was a good-looking guy, loud and bigger than me. As soon as he became a bachelor, I noticed that women were attracted to him. He actually dated some very sexy girls, even bringing them to our parties and dinners. None of his relationships lasted more than a few months. Carol and I discussed his problems, and she was the one who encouraged me to continue inviting him to our home. She kept saying that Jim was depressed about his failed marriage and needed our support. This was not true because I knew for sure that he had no problems finding dates. But Carol insisted that we remain good friends and help him deal with the bad memories of the divorce. I often told Carol that she didn't have to worry so much about him. I didn't want to characterize my friend unfairly, so I never mentioned that he was a liar, a cheater, and probably deserved a divorce. I said that Jim is an attractive single guy with a well-paying job and women everywhere are attracted to him. She didn't agree. Carol said that he was simply hiding his depression about his failed marriage, that he is our friend and we cannot leave him. I think I just agreed with her opinion and continued our friendship. He was my best friend for many years, and to tell you the truth, I was glad to have him around. This went on for many years. However, in the last few months, things have started to change. As usual, Jim came by quite often and had been for some time. But Carol increasingly mentioned his supposedly fragile emotional state. It was strange because Jim didn't seem depressed. But she had been talking about it for so long that I considered it a normal topic of conversation. However, when even more strange events began at our home, I began to suspect something was wrong. I worked harder than ever as an accountant. But over the past couple of years, my career has stalled. I didn't get the promotion I deserved. I still had a few important clients, and I was still making decent money. And I still provided Carol, Jenny, and myself with a good standard of living. Carol also worked part-time in an art studio, earning little money. So our finances, although not improving significantly, were still fine. The problem arose when I told my wife that we would have to cut back on expenses. When I told her that we would have to cancel our annual leave, she was shocked. I explained the situation and told her that in addition to canceling our vacation, we would have to cut back on some other expenses, such as frequent trips to restaurants. At this point, we usually went out to dinner, dance, or a show every weekend. Carol did not understand why, after so many years of work, our financial situation had worsened. I continued to explain to my skeptical spouse that my income had dropped and my chances of getting a raise anytime soon were slim. Carol has always led an active social life. She had many friends and loved to dress up and attend expensive social events. In the past, I was reluctant to agree to her wishes when she accepted invitations to various celebrations. But with my decreased income, high mortgage payment, car payments, and my responsibility for our daughter's education, we needed to cut costs somewhere. Carol was not happy when I told her that we would no longer be able to maintain our previous standard of living. She was shocked when I suggested cutting back on going to expensive restaurants with her friends. Of course, this conversation led to an argument and then a big fight about our future. At first, it didn't seem strange to me that my friend Jim was there during some of these fights. He has been coming to our house several times a week for the past few months. It was therefore inevitable that he would witness some of our discussions. It was awkward when he seemed to take Carol's side in our arguments. He didn't do it explicitly. When Carol and I discussed our problems, he listened for a while. Then he offered comments that at first glance seemed conciliatory. But when I thought about it later, he always agreed with Carol. When I suggested cutting back on going out with our friends, Carol turned to Jim and asked his opinion. He thought about it, but in the end supported Carol. He repeated her arguments and even offered to help us with finances if needed. I didn't like this answer. He offered to take us if we wanted to go somewhere. If Carol and I wanted to go to a club where you had to pay admission, Jim even offered to pay admission. If we were invited to a party, he was willing to buy a gift so that we wouldn't show up empty-handed. I thanked him but declined. I wanted to make my wife happy, but I was annoyed that he constantly offered financial help. I knew he could afford it. He left his previous job and was now working in sales, apparently quite successfully. One evening, Carol invited Jim to dinner without telling me, which had become a common occurrence. As always, she was a great hostess. We had a nice chat after finishing a delicious dinner prepared by Carol. After our daughter left to do her homework, we moved into the living room and opened a bottle of wine. As Carol poured the wine and sat down, she reminded me of the upcoming annual charity event. I forgot about it, although we went to it every year. I listened as she talked about how many of our friends would be there and how wonderful it was. I already knew about this event and how much it costs. When I explained that we couldn't afford any events this month, Jim suddenly spoke up. He said he understood my reluctance, but it was a charity event, and it would be a shame not to contribute. Carol listened to him with an expression of delight on her face. When my friend offered to help us with expenses, Carol was delighted. I was furious. He knew very well about our financial situation and my attitude to this issue. I expected my best friend to support my decision, but that was not the case. Carol listened silently to my objections. Then she glanced at me and looked at Jim. They exchanged a look that immediately aroused my suspicions. "Come on, Mark," Jim said forcefully. "You know it's an annual event and we never miss it. It would be a shame not to go for a few bucks." We've been going there for years, and I was upset too. But I knew we needed to keep expenses under control in order to meet the large mortgage payment this month. "We just have to go, darling," Carol insisted, patting my arm. "I know it's going to be a little tense, but all our friends will be there." Jim added, "You know the guys will be happy to see you, Mark. I know they're all looking forward to it. It'll be fun." Before I could answer, Carol exclaimed, "We had such a good time last year, remember, dear?" I shook my head to indicate that I disagreed, and Carol frowned. With a determined look on her face, she said, "I'm serious, Mark. We have to go, honey. All our friends will be there, and I've already talked to Mary and Gwen. I don't want them to think we're not doing our bit for charity. Everyone wants to donate to charity, but I thought that if we didn't get our finances in order, we would need charity ourselves. It's just not in the budget this year," I told them bluntly. "Maybe next year." "But it'll be fun," Jim said with a smile. "Of course it will," said Carol. She looked at me haughtily and turned to Jim. "But damn, Mark just doesn't want to go." Jim questioned my decision again. Before I could answer, my wife started complaining about how stingy I was. She didn't say anything new. I did hold back on some of our expenses. She turned to Jim and listed several times I had denied her wishes. "See, Jim," she told him, ignoring me. "I try to enjoy a busy social life, but Mark won't let me. He gets stingy as he gets older." Carol made me sound like a grumpy old man. I tried to answer calmly, but it was difficult. "I'm not stingy, Carol. I'm just realistic. Despite what you think, we're in a bit of a hole right now. Spending money we don't have is just stupid. In our situation, I don't want to overburden us. But think of all the good we can do, dear." Jim quickly added, "You know this is a charity event, right, Mark?" "Of course I do," I exclaimed irritably. "But that's $75 a plate. Then there's the parking fee at the club. And after an expensive dinner we can't afford, there'll be a charity auction. We'll be forced to bid on expensive items we'll never need, charity or not. We can't afford it." This led to a heated discussion about my downgraded position at work and my salary cut. Jim already knew about this, but these were sensitive issues that I wanted to keep private because I was quite embarrassed. Carol seized the moment and began to really vent her frustrations to me and Jim about how I wasn't living up to her expectations and our life plans. I didn't want her to divulge all these details, but it was too late. I accepted that we needed to cut costs to afford Jenny's education and pay the mortgage on time. I hoped this would bring a sense of reality to my wife, but she showed no sympathy. "See what I mean?" Carol said with contempt, looking hopefully at Jim. He always comes up with some stupid excuse not to go anywhere. I was furious. These two openly attacked me, challenging my arguments and completely ignoring my concerns. Carol looked at Jim hopefully, waiting for him to say something in her support. Jim looked at her and then at me with sympathy. "Well, Mark, why don't I cover your expenses then?" he quickly suggested. "I don't want to go alone and I have money. It's not a problem. It will be my pleasure to take you and Carol to this event. We always have fun. I will be sad if you are not there. After all, you supported me for the last year since my divorce. So, in a way, I'll be paying you back. I'll be happy to take you both for company. I'll be my driver and even pay for a babysitter for Jenny." "Is it true?" exclaimed Carol, delighted that he had come to her aid. "Oh my God, Jim, this is wonderful. Thank you so much." Before I could reject his offer, she ran around the table, hugged him, and kissed him, repeating, "Thank you, Jim, thank you." I was furious, not only because Jim contradicted my decision, but also because of Carol's joyful reaction to his proposal. She didn't care about my opinion, and she literally rushed to him. At that moment, she thanked him enthusiastically, as if he were her savior. I gave Jim a look of disapproval as Carol continued to hug him. Carol happily continued to praise him while I sat at the table, feeling angry and disgusted. Despite what Carol said, I had no intention of accepting anyone's charity, even if it came from a friend. What offended me the most was Carol's enthusiastic reaction. For now, Jim wrapped his arm around her waist as she kissed him on the cheek and hugged him tightly. I clearly rejected his offer. My pride did not allow me to accept handouts from anyone. They stopped hugging and Carol looked at me coldly. "Come on, Mark," Jim said. "Don't be angry." Noticing my frown, he added with a smile, "Let's just go to this event and have fun. We can worry about the money later." "No damn way. I'm serious about this." Carol stated, "Oh, just shut up, Mark. You can sulk about this all you want, but we're going and it's final." "We'll see." She looked at me like I was crazy. There was a strange expression on her face. She shook her head and moved away from Jim's embrace. She then ran to the kitchen, grabbed her cell phone, and called one of her friends. While Carol was in the other room, Jim and I sat in silence. I glared at him with hatred as we both listened to my wife chatting in the other room. Jim looked a little uncomfortable while Carol chatted cheerfully with her friend. "Oh yeah, we're going. I told you we were going," she exclaimed into the phone. "Oh yeah, I know. Well, not really, but I told you we'd go. I know what you were thinking, girl, but I knew Jim would help us out. He's such a good friend." "No, I don't think so. But you know how we can." Her voice suddenly became quieter, and I could no longer hear what she was saying. Carol then looked out into the living room and gave me a smug look. She spoke quietly into the phone, going into another room for privacy. After that fight, my friendship with Jim was destroyed. I thought that as my friend he would take my side, but he didn't seem to care that he was ignoring me. Several times he tried to explain that he just wanted Carol and I to have a good time, and that I should accept it. In my understanding, he chose a side, and it was not mine. After some time, my wife returned to the room with a huge smile on her face. She thanked Jim again, hugged him, and kissed him on the cheek. It seemed excessive to me when she clearly didn't want to leave his arms. I said again that we weren't going, and it was my decision. Jim tried to intervene, and Carol continued to hug him, insisting that she would go and did not want to hear anything. I kept shaking my head in disagreement, but neither Jim nor my wife listened to me. I think they decided to use the time before the event to convince me to change my mind. Looking back, this argument may have been the beginning of the end of our once happy marriage. The week before the charity event was frosty in our house. Even our daughter, Jenny, noticed the icy atmosphere. She was 14, but she was not stupid. She knew about the charity event and knew there was an unresolved problem brewing between Carol and me. "What happened, Dad?" she asked once when Carol left the room. "I know you and Mom are arguing about something." "She wants to accept charity, but I don't want to." "Charity? You mean social assistance or something? Not really, but it could be social assistance, I replied. I wasn't raised to depend on anyone. It's a matter of pride, honey. Once you start accepting money from people, it's hard to stop. I've never accepted charity in my life, and I'm not going to start now. It's because of a charity event, isn't it? Yeah, we just can't afford it, Jenny. I'm not going to accept a handout just to put on a show for our friends. But Mom said it was from Uncle Jimmy, she replied, studying my reaction. He's your friend, isn't he? I'm sure he doesn't think it's charity. It's just one friend helping another. Is this how your mom sees it? Jenny lowered her eyes. Well, we talked about it a little. It wasn't surprising. Carol argued that she was right to get Jenny's support behind my back. Knowing that my cunning wife was using my daughter to influence me made me furious. I'm sure your mom told you all about it, I said, trying to control my anger. But whether it comes from a friend or not, it is still charity. I don't want you to think that we are in such a dire situation. My father never accepted charity in his entire life, and he had more problems than we have. But Dad, it's just a party. It's not like accepting cash, you know. And Uncle Jimmy is our friend. It annoyed me that she kept calling him Uncle Jimmy. I think that's what Carol called him when I wasn't around. I answered my daughter with more anger than I should have. If your Uncle Jimmy, I said, emphasizing his title, were my true friend, he would keep his big mouth shut, stay out of my business, and leave my family alone. My abrupt response caught Jenny off guard, and she pulled back, looking scared. She then ran to her room and closed the door. I felt bad for speaking so rudely, but I was tired of hearing about Uncle Jimmy and his charity. I needed my family to support my decision, even though it didn't seem that way. Every day, Carol continued to make fun of me. I continued to insist that we would not go to the charity event, with or without Jim. Every time we discussed it, she would give me a dark look, and we would have another fight. A few days before the event, Carol approached me with undisguised irritation. Listen, Mark, she said, I don't know why you're so stressed out about this. You know we go to this event every year, and I don't intend to miss it this year, despite your problems at work. I know we have slight financial difficulties now, I understand that. But we are definitely not poor, and we still need to maintain our status. If we don't go, all my friends will know about our problems. They will talk about me, and I don't want to hear gossip about them. It was later that Jim offered to help us, and if you are the man I married, you will accept it with a smile. So that's what it's all about, I blurted out in anger. Am I not man enough now? Oh, damn it, Mark. Stop it. Of course you're a man. Just grow up. Then it's all about gossip. Not really. But yes, I want our family to look good, and I really want to be a valuable member of our society. We've made a lot of friends over the years, and I want to have a nice evening with them. Don't you want to see me? It's not fair, and you know it. Of course I want to be seen with you. I love you and always have. But this argument made me very angry. I thought that you would support your husband like a good wife should, and try to understand our situation. I see that this is not so. Therefore, if you want to disrespect me like that, just go without me. You bastard, she shouted in anger. You think I'm not a good wife? That's complete nonsense, and you know it. For 16 years, I took care of you and Jenny without a single complaint. Lord knows I could complain about a lot of things, but I didn't. What the hell? She looked at me with an icy gaze. She was silent for some time. The silence was deafening, and I waited. So will you insist on this until the end? She said bitterly. I thought I could convince you that it would be nice for us to spend the evening together. Lord knows that hasn't happened lately. You haven't taken me out on a date in months, and I'm tired of it. That's a lie. We have dinner together as a family every week. We also go out dancing sometimes, just not in the fancy, expensive places you're used to. I told you, Carol, we can't afford that now. As soon as Jenny's education is paid for, I think everything will be easier. Carol looked like she had bitten a lemon listening to me. She seemed to have made a decision and suddenly calmed down, but the triumphant expression on her face was alarming. So, dear husband, if you don't give me this one evening, then I guess I'll have to be Jim's date. I'm sure he'll be proud to be with me even if you don't. And don't think it'll be a platonic date. I'm going to give your friend all the attention I would give you, and I know he'll appreciate it. You're a bitch, I said with a rage I hadn't felt in a long time. I should have known it was in your head. I won't stop you. Go with him, but don't think that I will forget this dirty betrayal, and I won't forget Uncle Jim's participation. I ran out of the room and slammed the door as she screamed, "You bastard, I'm going to damn it." Well, that wasn't good at all. When I left, I walked past the living room. Jenny was watching TV. I know she heard the whole argument when she gave me a scared look. I wanted to hug and comfort her to calm her fears, but I was too angry at my stubborn wife to say anything kind. So I just went out onto the patio and sat on a chair, seething with anger. On the eve of the charity event, an icy atmosphere reigned in our house. Jim called me several times during the week to convince me to change my mind. I didn't mean to do this and just hung up the last time. Our finances were pretty shaky and we just needed to cut costs. I had to face the facts to keep our family safe, even if my wife didn't want me to. If she wanted to make a problem out of it, she'd get one. On the night of the event, I'm sure Carol prepared dinner, but I decided to stay away and eat somewhere cheap that evening. I returned home after Jenny and my wife finished dinner. I mumbled a greeting and Jenny said, "Hi, Dad." Carol didn't speak to me. She simply went to the bedroom and locked herself in to get ready for her date with Jim. To avoid a scene, Carol decided to go to Jim's house and go from there. When she went downstairs to leave, she did so in a way that showed off her sexy dress. If I wasn't furious before, I am now. She was wearing a short, tight aqua dress that I had never seen before. It was shockingly short and accentuated her curves, as if it had been painted onto her slender body. Her long hair was down, her makeup was on point, and her high heels highlighted her beautiful legs. The charity event wasn't that high profile, so I was shocked to see her dressed up like that. "Where did you get this dress?" "Don't worry about it." Where did she get the money for such an obviously expensive dress? But she wasn't going to tell me, so I didn't say anything. Carol ignored me and went to Jenny, who was sitting in front of the TV, leaned over and kissed our daughter. "Wow, you look amazing, Mom. You look like a movie star in that dress." "Thank you, dear." Carol's smile disappeared as she gave me a significant look. She said to Jenny loud enough for me to hear, "I know Uncle Jim thinks so too. I wish everyone thought so." Of course, this comment was directed at me, and I was furious. Unlike our dates, Carol never looked so good on any of them. But she did everything possible for Uncle Jim. I understood that this would be a problem. I just looked at her with disgust and left the room. I wanted her to know that I was angry, and she knew it. "Goodbye, Jenny," Carol said, heading for the door. "Talking to my daughter and ignoring me. I might be back late, honey, so don't wait up for me." She walked out and didn't look back. Jenny saw my gloomy face and gave me a look of pure pity. This made me angry again. I knew she didn't like being in the middle of it, and I wasn't happy either. Something about my daughter feeling sorry for me made me even angrier. I went into my office and quickly sent a message to my ex-best friend. "I thought we were friends, Jim. Now that you're dating my wife, I know you're just another sneaky bastard. After tonight, don't try to contact me and don't consider yourself my friend. You're no longer welcome at my house. Have a good time with my bitch wife, asshole." I quickly received an answer. "This is not a date, Mark, and you know it. I wanted you to go, but you're too stubborn. I just want Carol to have a good time, and then I'll get her home safe. We need to talk later. Please don't be mad at me." I replied, "Fuck you, asshole." There was no answer. I tried not to think about my wife, but it was impossible. Jenny and I watched TV for a while and tried to act as if nothing had happened. I don't even remember what we watched. She could tell I was upset. To her credit, Jenny spoke to me kindly and tried to lift my spirits. I was glad about it, but it still didn't make the evening enjoyable, and we both knew that. About 10 o'clock, Jenny went to bed. It was early for her. The situation was so awkward that I think she just couldn't stand the tension anymore. I heard her talking on her cell phone to someone when I went to bed. Somehow I managed to fall asleep, but I was awakened by the sound of the front door closing. I looked at the clock and saw that it was 2:30 at night. I heard voices below and realized that it was my wife and my ex-friend. I got out of bed and looked into the living room. They were still standing at the front door, and it was obvious that Carol was very drunk, so drunk and unstable that she had to hold Jim's hand for support. Her hair was disheveled, her eyes were half-lidded, and she was swaying and giggling. "Thank you for such a wonderful evening, Jimmy." She laughed, slurring her tongue, hugging him tightly. She put her arms around his neck, pressed her thin body against his, and kissed him on the lips. This went on for much longer than was appropriate, and Carol didn't seem to want it to end. Finally, Jim pulled away and looked around nervously. "It was fun, but it's late and you should go to bed, Carol." "But I don't want to." "Go to sleep. Mark might be worried about you." "To hell with it," she laughed mockingly. "He's boring, and I had such a good time with you. Let's do it again, okay?" I stood at the top of the stairs where they couldn't see me. Jim looked uncomfortable as he looked down the corridor. He knew where our bedroom was. He couldn't see me, but he probably wondered if I was listening to them. "Let's not talk about it now," he told her. "Go take a shower, go to bed, and try to make peace with your husband." "To hell with him," Carol laughed again, hugging his neck. "Why don't you stay and have a drink with me? It's not too late, honey." "No, I don't think that's a good idea. You know he's upset, right? I showed you his message earlier. He's just hysterical, and I don't care. Why don't we go to the couch, and I'll pour you a drink? Please." "No, Carol, not today." "Come on." She purred and kissed him again. This time, Carol kissed him passionately before he pushed her away. "Please, Carol, I'm trying not to get in trouble." He laughed. "You're making this very difficult." I was already furious, but I was stunned when I saw her hand move between them and grab his pants. "I feel like you're excited and big too," she laughed cheerfully. "Actually, I knew you were pretty big every time we danced together. Come on, don't go yet." Jim grinned, but removed her hand and said, "You better stop." "Come on, Jim. I can see you want to stay. Let's go to the couch, and I'll show you how much I appreciate all the attention you showed me today." "No, I'm serious, Carol." Jim looked more worried. "I know you're a beautiful woman, and I'm horny, of course. But I don't want to cause any more problems with Mark. We're friends, you know." "And you are my friend, too," Carol said. "Mark is sleeping and doesn't care about me. I want you to be my special friend. Jim, please stay a little longer." I couldn't take this crap anymore. I walked out into the room with hatred on my face. "Yes, Jim," I said sharply, stunning them both. "Why don't you be Carol's special friend, you bastard?" Jim and Carol both jumped at my presence. I continued sarcastically, "Why don't you stay a little and entertain my cheap, drunk, easy-to-get wife? After such a nice date, I'm sure she'll appreciate it." Jim's eyes widened and his face fell. He pushed my wife away, and Carol, blushing, tried to focus. It took her a little time to come to her senses and sober up slightly. "Listen, Mark," Jim began to speak. "No, you listen, you sick bastard. Now I see what a special friend you are to my wife. So just take her. Take her to the couch and give that dirty, slutty bitch what she wants." Jim's eyes dropped, and he shook his head regretfully as he headed for the exit. Carol screamed, "No," grabbed his arm, and pulled him back. "Just shut up, Mark. Jim has been nice to me all evening, and he doesn't deserve it." "Then give him what he deserves, bitch," I shouted. "You want him, so go ahead, cheating bitch." "Fucking bastard," Carol screamed. Her face was beet red. Jim just wanted to fall through the ground. "Listen, Mark," Jim said apologetically. I know you're upset about tonight and everything, but we had a great night and nothing happened and— You give me your word, right, freak? I said with contempt. Can I trust you? Yes, nothing happened. I know it looks bad. Why, Uncle Jim? I asked with anger. Why does it look bad? Because my bitch is trying to give you a hand job and maybe please you for being so kind. Or because she's taking you to the couch to have sex. That's why, Uncle Jim. Jim looked at Carol, then at me. He shook his head and headed towards the exit to quickly escape. On the way, he told me, No, Mark. Look, I have to go. He told my drunken wife, I better go, Carol. I'll help you pick up your car later if you want. I think he wanted to say more, but he saw my gaze. Instead, he twisted out of her grasp and hurried out the front door. When she closed behind him, Carol seemed broken. She looked drunk and depressed as she swayed into the kitchen to drink some water, probably to sober up. I left her there and went back to bed. My marriage was no longer on solid ground. Carol woke up on the sofa. She never came upstairs, and I found her lying there the next morning, stretched out in her new dress. I tried to control my anger as I helped her up to the bedroom and laid her down on the bed. I did not undress her and left her lying in this tight, obviously expensive aqua dress. I took off her high heels and covered her with a blanket. Carol slept until late afternoon, suffering from a hangover, and I understand why after seeing her drunken antics last night. I was furious that she just rushed towards Jim, but I decided not to show it. I wanted to see how she would play it before I showed my cards. I knew our relationship had been strained for some time. The controversy over the charity event was simply the latest in a string of controversies. However, this was the biggest argument we ever had. Carol finally got up for dinner and looked terrible. We didn't talk because she didn't want to. I simply remained silent, deciding to let her bring up her disgusting behavior herself. She slept in the guest room, and we tiptoed around each other all weekend. She was so drunk that I'm not sure if Carol even remembered much of that night. She wasn't used to alcohol, so whatever she drank that night probably nearly incapacitated her. On Saturday morning, I made breakfast for myself and Jenny. She mentioned that Carol had returned home with Jim and asked what our fight was about. I didn't give her much explanation, just saying we're still working on the charity event issue. Jenny accepted this vague explanation and left home early. She said she was going to a friend's house. I asked her to call in a few hours. On Monday, I went to work as usual. Carol took time to recover and did not return to work until Wednesday. We didn't discuss that night until the middle of the next week. I think it took her that long to come to her senses after all the alcohol she drank. She looked embarrassed as she tried to apologize for her behavior. I was still too angry to accept any apology. I let her say she was sorry, then turned and walked away, leaving her standing there. This made her angry, but I didn't care anymore. Jim called me several times. I ignored his calls and let them go to voicemail. I listened to him apologize for how that evening had turned out, and that he wanted to talk about it. He wanted to meet, but I didn't answer. I'm sure he wanted to assuage his guilt for betrayal, but I didn't care about him. For me, our friendship is over. One evening, while I was washing the car, I went back inside to get something and heard Carol talking on the phone in the kitchen. She didn't know I was there, so I tried to listen in on her conversation. Yes, it was wonderful. She said to the person she was talking to, I know he's still mad at me. Ha. Yeah, so what? Thanks. No, Mark didn't get it. Jim bought it for me. Yeah, I know. It cost a lot of money. He is so cute and so handsome. I would have done it anyway. Ha. But Mark woke up when I was trying to. Yes, I know Mark saw him, how I tried it, and… Yes, I know. Yes, ha. My whore wife was talking to one of her friends about Jimmy. Oh, Mark would make a scene if he found out about this. No, you can't tell him. No. Ha. I have to keep this a secret. I hope he does. We're trying to figure out when. I know, but I have to be careful. Mark doesn't know. Yeah, he called me. He called me all week. I don't know if I can. Of course, I want. Who wouldn't want to date a guy like Jim? You better not tell. Seriously. Okay, I know. She talked a little more, but I heard enough. I was pretty sure she was going out with my ex-friend. It was hard to believe how much our marriage had deteriorated over the past few weeks. I caught Carol on the phone several more times. Every time I entered the room, she either turned away and spoke in a lower voice or simply hung up. Over the weekend, Jim suddenly showed up at our house in his big SUV. I was tinkering with my car when he parked in the driveway. He got out of his big car and walked towards our house with a smile. Carol must have known he was coming, because as soon as he left, she immediately left with a strange smile on her face. We didn't talk. Therefore, when she came up to me and started talking, I immediately became wary. "Hi, honey. I invited Jim to dinner," she said bluntly. When I started to object, she raised her hand to stop me. "Listen, Mark, I know what you'll say. You're still mad about that night. But I think you both need to talk. Jim wants to. We need to get over this and be friends again." Jim was a few feet away and smiled as he approached. "Hi, Mark," he said kindly, extending his hand. "Good to see you, buddy." I just looked at this idiot with a cold gaze. Trying to diffuse the situation, Carol came up to me with a sweet smile and hugged my waist. She whispered, "Come on, honey," with a big smile, trying to push me forward so I could shake his hand. I just left it hanging in the air and ignored it. Jim's smile disappeared as he realized the insult and lowered his hand. Next to me, Carol tried to soften the tense atmosphere. "Hi, Jim," she exclaimed, ignoring my stern look. "It's good to see you. I'm glad you came today. I was just telling Mark that it's time to clear things up and—" "Fuck you," I growled. Carol was stunned. Her bright smile faded a little. "You're welcome, Mark," Jim said. "I know you're still angry, but—" "Oh, did you find out after all?" I felt my wife's arm tighten around my waist. She pressed herself against me, trying to keep me from getting angry. "Please, darling," Carol purred, pressing my hand to her chest. She tried to kiss me on the cheek. "Don't be mad at him. It's my fault that everything turned out this way, not his. Jim has been your friend for so many years, and I know you miss him. He misses you too, doesn't he, Jim?" "That's right," said Jim. "Well, Mark, don't hold it against me, right, buddy?" I looked at him with a look that could kill. Then I pulled away from Carol's embrace. I looked him straight in the eye, wanting to shoot the bastard. In a somber tone, I asked him, "So tell me, friend, did you have a good time with my wife at the charity event?" "Well, yeah, of course we had a good time." Carol chirped, "We wanted you to come too, Mark. It would be more fun if you were there, honey. You'd love it." She hadn't spoken to me for almost a week, and now she was acting so sweet and innocent. I didn't believe her for a second. Jim looked at me warily, and I looked straight into his eyes. "So you danced together?" I asked him. Well, yeah. Everyone was dancing and everything. Of course." Carol came up to me again and put her arm around me. Smiling sweetly, she said, "Of course we danced, Mark. Everyone was dancing and having a great time. Like I said, you'd love it if you came." I ignored my wife's annoying chirping and continued to look at Jim. "So you were dancing, right? What about slow dancing, Jim, old friend? Holding Carol in your arms? Did you feel her breasts on your chest in that revealing dress?" His face distorted into a strange grimace. He was at ease, confused by these provocative questions. "No, nothing like that, Mark," he answered innocently. "Just, dancing and having fun. Nothing inappropriate." I glared at him for a while. I then pushed Carol so that she was next to him and turned my attention to her. "And you, my dear honest wife," I grinned. "It was all just friendly dancing, like Jim said. Just two friends doing platonic activities, nothing inappropriate, right?" "Of course not, Mark," she flushed. I would never do anything to disrespect you, darling. You know that." I took out my mobile phone and opened the photo. One guy I knew was at an event with his wife. At my request, he sent me several compromising photos of my wife and this bastard. I turned the phone so Carol could see. It didn't take long for her to realize that it was her and Jim dancing closely at a charity event. Suddenly, the blood drained from her face and her eyes popped out of their sockets. Yes, my faithful wife. Dancing like this with my dear old friend is just platonic dancing, right, honey? I chuckled sarcastically as I looked at the phone. Jim came closer to see and his face darkened. "Where did you get this?" he asked. The picture was of Carol and Jim on the dance floor. Couples danced around them. Some looked with a grin at my wife and my former friend, locked in an intimate embrace. Jim is taller than me and towered over Carol. This did not stop her from wrapping her arms around his neck, pressing her slender body against him, and Jim leaning in and kissing her on the lips. It was a static shot, so it was impossible to tell how long the kiss lasted. But for a person who did not know them, it was very compromising. Carol's face paled when she saw how intimate their embrace was, not to mention their kiss. I heard Jim gulp. "Oh, God." I turned over another photo and asked, "Carol, my dear, I think you liked that kiss, judging by the way you looked into his eyes." The next picture only showed their upper bodies. Jim's hands were on her waist, and Carol looked at him with adoration in her eyes. The neighboring couple looked at them with a smile. I flipped over another photo of them sitting in a booth. Jim's arm was wrapped around her shoulders, his hand hovering over her chest. Carol leaned against his shoulder, her face raised towards his, as if expecting another kiss. The last photo was taken on the terrace. They hugged and Carol didn't try to pull away. Jim's hand was on her ass, and she was leaning against his tall body. They didn't kiss, but it looked like they were about to. Both Jim and my wife were stunned by the photos. Jim's face turned red with embarrassment, and he began making sounds as if he was trying to say something. Carol deflated with shame, but seemed to be the first to come to her senses. "Who sent them to you? Who cares?" "Well, I know it looks bad, darling," she muttered. But it's really not like that. Not like that at all." "Oh, really, Carol?" I said incredulously. "It looks like my wife and my ex-boyfriend were on an intimate date, kissing, hugging, and who knows what else. They probably had sex in the parking lot. Maybe you invited him to do it on our couch. Remember that, you stupid bitch." I looked deeply into Carol's eyes as she lowered hers. "I can't believe you acted like an easy girl right in front of people we know. Did you feel it well, honey? Were you going to have sex with him when you got home? Or would it be the second time that night?" Jim snapped, "No, Mark. I know it looks bad, but it really isn't. Nobody thought we were a couple. We just drank a little and had fun." Carol intervened. "Yeah, Mark, it's more my fault than Jim's," she explained, trying to sound reasonable. "I probably drank too much and got a little flirty. But nothing happened, dear. Just a little kiss and a little hug, you know, maybe a little inappropriate, but no worries." "Did you feel it well, Carol?" Her jaw dropped. Jim frowned in irritation. "Listen, Mark, it's not fair." "Unfair?" I shouted so loudly that they both flinched. My wife looked around in confusion, afraid that the neighbors would hear me and come out to find out what was going on. I was hoping they would come out. "Please, Mark." "Not so loud," she whispered. "Can we go inside and talk about this?" "Hell no," I shouted. "I feel quite good here. I don't want to see that bastard in my house ever again." I turned to her and asked, "So, Carol, honey, let me ask you one more question. Where did you get that bitch green dress? You know, the one with the breasts falling out. I know I can't afford it, and I doubt you will either." My question took her by surprise. Carol's eyes widened in surprise, and her jaw dropped. I heard Jim swallow. "Shit." And he seemed to sag a little. "No answer," I said in an accusing tone. I turned to Jim, whose eyes were darting around restlessly and guilt was written all over his face. "You bought her that dress, you bastard? Don't try to lie, you bastard." "Well, he began to say, looking at Carol. My wife stopped him with a hand gesture and said softly, "Yes, Mark." Her eyes dropped. I needed something nice to wear, and I haven't bought anything new for a long time. The dress was a gift from Jim, and I knew you wouldn't like it, so I decided not to tell you. And those high heels you were wearing, the ones that added 5 inches to your height and made you look like a $20 easy-to-get girl. Come on, Mark, Jim said with irritation. They're not that much. Carol's red face and shifty eyes told me everything I needed to know. I see how this is going, you bitch, I snapped at her. He basically bought you for that night, and you tried to thank him later. You do realize that's what cheap bitches do, right? He paid for you, and you tried to have sex with him. Carol seemed to wilt with shame. Her face became hard, and her eyes flashed. Jim tried to intervene. Please, Mark, there is no need for this. I turned to him and shouted, You make my wife easy to get, and you have the nerve to tell me everything is fine? You're a real bastard. I want you to die. Both. One of our neighbors was watching from the porch. Carol noticed that we had an audience, and she blushed and looked embarrassed. I had nothing more to say to these two, so I jumped into my car to leave. Jim moved quickly and tried to grab my hand. When he pushed me back, I turned around and tried to throw a punch. I missed, and he pushed me to the ground before I could hit again. He could knock me down with one blow. This guy is taller and bigger than me by at least 40 pounds. Not only bigger, but more muscular and athletic. A physical confrontation would only make me look ridiculous. I stood up and brushed myself off as he held his hands in a protective position, trying to calm me down. As for making my wife easy to get, I said, glancing at Carol with disgust. Well, you bastard, you're definitely doing well. She looked at me with a stunned expression. The neighbors on the porch were clearly interested in what was happening. Another couple from the street passed by and carefully watched the quarrel. Now you're his prostitute, bitch, I shouted loud enough for our audience to hear. He paid for your dress, your heels, and your date, so just take him to the house and give him the reward. Or please him. We all know you wanted to do it that night, right? I headed to my car, and this time he was out of the way. Another neighbor looked out his door to see what was going on. Carol blushed as she noticed that our audience had grown. I recently learned how important her reputation is to her. This public analysis of our relationship was probably killing her. Mark, please stop, honey, she begged in a whisper. Don't leave yet. It's not like that. Let's go inside and talk about it. Yes, Mark. We really need to clear this up, buddy, the bastard agreed. I looked at them both like they were pieces of crap on my shoes. Yes, I want to finish this, I told him bitterly. So if you're still here when I get back, I'll pull out my gun and shoot you. Clear. Jim looked at me silently. Carol looked depressed and angry. I spat at their feet, jumped into my car, pulled out of the driveway, and drove away with the tires squealing. Our area will have juicy gossip for months to come. When I returned home that night, Jim was gone. Carol was in bed, and I was drunk as hell. I called a taxi because I was too drunk to drive, and the bartender wouldn't let me leave the bar with my keys. I collapsed on the couch and didn't wake up until noon the next day. I immediately called work and said I was sick. My boss was furious, but I couldn't work with such a hangover. I also took the next day off because I still wasn't okay. Finally, I woke up and ate something. It helped. Carol went to her part-time job at an art gallery, and Jenny was at school. I think I felt a little guilty about my behavior. I don't know why. I still blamed Carol and Jim for the problem. When Jenny got home from school, I apologized for my loud argument. She pretended it didn't matter. But I knew that she probably saw everything and heard everything I said to her mother and Uncle Jimmy. We talked about it for a while and dropped the topic. I prepared dinner before Carol returned. She didn't show up on time, so Jenny and I had dinner without her. I was still angry, but my hangover softened my anger a little, and when my wife finally returned, I didn't reproach her again and just left her alone. We ate, put away the dishes, and went to bed that night without touching or even speaking. The next day we tried to act normal for Jenny's sake, and the atmosphere in the house became a little better. She made an apology of sorts, saying she was sorry I wasn't at the event, and despite how bad the photos looked, there was nothing inappropriate between her and Jim. I noted that she didn't apologize for going, just for the way things turned out. I let her speak and did not answer. A few days later, I heard her talking on the phone again. She thought I was in the yard and did not notice that I was around the corner when she spoke frankly. "It's okay. Yes, I can talk. He's not in the yard. No, he's still very upset about all this. I don't want to discuss this with him yet. Yeah, well, you know what? Yeah, maybe if we're careful we can. I don't know. I just don't want to cause any more problems." She listened for a while, then said, "He won't be so lenient next time. Okay, yes, I'll call you later. Of course I miss you. We can't. No, please, I know. Just let me talk to him first. Okay, that's right. I'll talk to him tonight and get back to you. Probably tomorrow. Yes, I can't talk right now. He was in the yard, but I'm not sure where he is now. Fine. Everything is fine. Right. Call me, okay? Bye." Then she hung up. I knew something was going on, but I wasn't sure what. I assumed she was talking to Jim, but I wasn't sure. Coincidence or not, Jim called me that evening. It was just after dinner, and I was on the patio. It was Friday, and Jenny was staying at a friend's house for the night and was due back on Saturday afternoon. I saw his name on the call ID and was hesitant whether to pick up or not. Carol suddenly went outside. "Is this your phone, dear?" she asked when it rang. Now I knew it was a setup. "Why don't you answer, Mark?" I chuckled and picked up the phone. "What do you want, bastard?" I grumbled, knowing it was Jim. "Hey, buddy, I just wanted to talk," he said cheerfully. Carol looked at me as I answered, "Oh, really? Well, I want a faithful, loving, honest wife. So what?" "Listen, Mark, I know things have been tense between us lately, so I wanted to do something to relieve the tension." I didn't answer. "I'm having a little party at my house. I would like to invite you and Carol to join us. These are just a few of our friends. Nice people, you know. I'll be grilling, so there's no need to bring anything. Just come and have a good time." I was silent, considering his proposal. The truth is that I felt a little regret these past few days. Despite my anger, I still loved Carol. I knew she missed the social life she used to have and wished I could do a better job of entertaining her. Jim used to be a good friend, my best friend in fact. Despite my feelings, I missed having someone to hang out with. I noticed that Carol was nearby, looking at the yard, but clearly pretending not to eavesdrop. These two were so transparent, it was almost funny. "Don't know. Please, Mark, I know how you feel, but we can't go on like this forever. Let's bury the hatchet for a while and have a couple of beers with friends. Bring Carol, and I'm sure we can all forget this. Fine." I looked at Carol. She looked at me and smiled. "Let's see. I'll talk to Carol, and we'll see. I hope you come, both. It will be simple. I have everything prepared. Food, beer, so don't worry about anything. I'm sure you'll like it, buddy. Hope to see you later." I hung up and Carol immediately asked, "Who was it, dear?" "Nobody." Carol looked puzzled. "Nobody? Tell me who?" she asked sweetly, as if she didn't know. "Jim is throwing a party," I said indifferently. "Oh, really?" she exclaimed, smiling. "This is good. Yes, he wants us to come. He wants to kill the hatchet of war." Carol seemed to want to say something, but she simply smiled and asked, "So what did you tell him? Are we going?" "I think yes." She jumped towards me and hugged me tightly. After so many weeks of alienation, I felt my body react to her warmth. "Oh, wonderful. This is great, Mark," she rejoiced. "I know we'll have fun." "Don't count on it," I muttered. She kissed me on the cheek and ran into the house to get ready. I was wary about this whole plan, but I was exhausted from the constant fighting and was ready to see how it would all turn out. In any case, Carol couldn't blame me for not trying to improve our relationship. As for friendship with Jim, it was unlikely. The party was surprisingly good. There were about 30 people, more than I expected. Jim went out of his way to provide food and drinks. Most of those present were married couples, with a few single women and guys. There were enough people around that it wasn't obvious that I was staying away from Jim. Carol was next to me most of the time. She went to see her friends for a while, and I spent time with the guys. I drank beer, but not too much. I wasn't going to get drunk and suddenly pretend everything was normal again. I think Carol noticed my distant behavior. "Everything is fine," she whispered. I didn't look at her, muttering, "Yes, nice party." "Is it true? I'm having fun. I hope you do too," she said, looking into my eyes with hope. Then she asked quietly, "Did you talk to Jim?" My expression darkened, and she noticed it. "Sorry, I don't want to upset you, Mark." "Then just leave it. You have been such good friends, and I hope you will be again." "Forget it, Carol," I said coldly, glancing at her. "Jim and I will never be friends again, not like before. He's a bastard and always will be. Let's just have fun this evening and not bring up old bad memories." Carol hardly drank, and neither did I. Jim was busy playing host and only came up to us a couple of times to ask if everything was okay. He had a woman with him, some beauty he seemed to work with, and they greeted guests together. Carol approached Jim and his companion. They talked for a while, and when Carol returned, she brought her and introduced her to me. I simply nodded and let my wife do the talking. I didn't even remember her name. She probably thought I was a jerk for not being more polite, but I didn't care about her or Jim either. After a few minutes of awkward conversation, they headed to the bar to make themselves drinks. Later, Jim turned on the music and people started dancing. Carol asked me if I wanted to dance. I refused. She was a little disappointed, but didn't complain. The sun began to set and couples with children began to leave. The others started drinking more. Several more couples appeared and joined in the fun. Soon the beer was flowing and the party became noisy. Several wives we knew no longer danced with their husbands. Several guys asked Carol to dance. She cautiously agreed after my silent permission. I sat and just looked at her in silence. Carol is an attractive woman, so it's no surprise that guys kept asking her to dance. She danced to fast songs and showed off her moves, which were very sexy. When the slow songs started, she kept glancing at me. Usually at these events, she would flirt. But today, she limited her coquetry. She seemed to be enjoying herself, but did not dance closely with either partner. Nothing like what I saw in the photos from the charity event, and she didn't dance with Jim. When she noticed that I was not joining in the fun, she stopped dancing and sat down next to me. Carol left briefly to talk with her friends when Jim's date came to my table and asked me to dance. I politely declined. She pouted and offered to bring me another beer. I refused. She was a pretty girl, cute with a good figure, typical of the girls Jim was always surrounded with. But I was not interested in her, and I tried to make it clear that I did not want her company. Instead of taking the hint, she plopped down next to me, took a sip of her beer, smiled widely, and started talking. She didn't leave, and to be polite, I chatted with her. She seemed a little drunk and kept giggling at what I said, even if it wasn't funny. In between laughs, she kept touching me, rubbing my arm and leg, and kept offering to bring me more beer. I kept refusing, and she kept trying to get me to get up and dance. At some point, she stood up and began to pull me by the arm, making a big scene in front of those around me. Everyone laughed at my reluctance. I was embarrassed and asked her to stop. She stopped and talked for a while before trying again. This time she slipped and accidentally fell into my lap. I tried to pull her to her feet, but she resisted. She just stayed there, laughing, with her arms around my neck. I removed her hands from her neck and lifted her up. As I picked it up, I noticed Jim and Carol standing next to each other. They spoke quietly, but in reality they were watching me fight off this drunken girl. Suddenly, I realized what was happening. This whole party was a setup. They tried to manipulate me into acting the same way they did at a charity event. This sexy girl was literally throwing herself at me, trying to make me behave badly so I couldn't criticize them. I gave my wife a stern look. She caught my eye, shuddered, and realized that I had understood their trick. I kept my eyes on my cunning wife as I pushed the girl away. When she wouldn't stop pestering me, I unceremoniously threw her off my lap. People around us laughed as I walked across the veranda, away from this cheap girl. I walked past Jim and barked, "Nice try, bastard." His face darkened as I left. A few moments later, Carol ran up to me, probably to deny that they had any ulterior motives. I didn't want to hear any more lies. When she started to say something, I stopped her with my gaze. The party was in full swing when I told my wife it was time to leave. She looked disappointed, but didn't argue. I didn't thank Jim for the invitation and went straight to the car. Carol said it would be rude not to thank him, so she approached Jim and his companion. She talked to them for a bit and Jim gave me a strange look. I was glad he didn't approach me because I didn't know how I would have reacted. Carol said goodbye to her friends. She clearly wanted to stay because the party was still in full swing, but she respected my wishes and we left as quickly as possible. It was quiet on the way home. Carol casually mentioned how much she liked it and how well everything was organized. I just nodded and remained silent. Carol chatted about her friends and how beautifully everything had been arranged by Jim. But my silence created a tense atmosphere by the time we returned home. It was all a setup: Jim's invitation, Jenny's sleepover at her friend's that same evening, and his girlfriend trying to make a fool of me. I was manipulated, and it was annoying. But I restrained myself, and Carol sighed with relief that I didn't make a scene. From the evening until this moment, everything was planned, so I was not surprised when my cunning wife began making love advances. From the moment we got home, she was sweet, touching and kissing me on her way to the bedroom. It had been a long time since we had sex, probably more than a month. Despite my irritation with my conniving wife, Carol is a sexy woman. Tonight she was dressed to seduce, and by this time I was horny. Carol is a very passionate lover when she wants to be. She really knows how to please, and that night she did just that. After she rolled over and fell asleep, I just lay there in the dark, thinking about the party we were at. I replayed the evening in my head again, when she was dancing and having fun. I remembered how she talked to Jim and how he kept glancing at me while they were talking. It was all planned, they manipulated me. I replayed every moment of their conversation, remembering Carol's joyful reaction as they spoke. I also remembered the night she decided to go with Jim, and how, when she returned home, she easily hugged and kissed him, and how she was ready to lay him down on the sofa. I know she was drunk and excited, but something about their friendly relationship seemed wrong. Jim's reaction worried me too. He seemed to enjoy kissing my wife, but was concerned about the location. I'm not sure he wouldn't have taken her up on her offer if Jenny and I weren't home. I know he has been a friend for decades, but the way he kissed my wife and how friendly they were seemed wrong. Have they done this before? This may not have been their first date. I tried to brush off these paranoid thoughts because I wanted to trust Carol, and I had trusted Jim before too. A quiet voice inside me whispered caution. At dinner, Carol was quite animated because of the party. There was no mention of a charity event. Jim called me several times after his party, but I didn't answer and just left his calls to voicemail. His messages said that he was glad that we came to his house and that he would like to meet again soon. He wanted us to be friends again and was willing to do anything to make it happen. I told Carol that Jim was calling me, but I wished he wouldn't. She seemed happy to hear that we were communicating. She asked if she could invite him to dinner. When I told her no, Carol frowned and we had another argument. Finally, she told me to stop acting up, as she put it, and kept reminding me what a good friend Jim was and how he helped us. I knew that he was successful in his job in sales and earned more than me. I was tired of hearing her constant praise for him, but I remained silent. Carol probably thought that everything was normal between us again. Probably Jenny too. Carol and I had sex again. Now she talked about Jim as if he were still my friend. I wasn't ready for this yet. But in the interest of maintaining a peaceful atmosphere in the family, I kept my mouth shut. This turned out to be a big mistake. I tried to keep an eye on Carol, but since she worked part-time and I was very busy at my job, it was impossible. She was home every night when I returned and always prepared dinner for Jenny and me. The sex we had enjoyed after Jim's party quickly faded away. We had sex a few more times, but Carol was not interested in it. She seemed distracted, as if she was simply fulfilling a duty. But if I was hoping for all those little kisses and touches that were there before, that was no longer the case. I was frustrated by our deteriorating relationship. But my work took so much energy that I could not pay attention to it. Carol didn't seem to care at all. She took care of the house, Jenny, and let me have sex with her once a week or so. We barely made love, but we still slept together. I think I should at least be happy about that. One evening, I managed to leave work early and wanted to invite Carol to dinner. Early evening for me meant getting home before 6 o'clock. It would have been a late dinner for us. But I thought I could get Jenny to spend the night at a friend's place, and we could spend the evening together. Of course, our financial situation was tense, but I thought we needed time to get close again. It's been a few weeks since we've been on a real date. I called home, but Carol was not there. Then I called her work, and a woman answered, saying that Carol was unavailable. "Oh, okay. Will it be available later?" I asked. "Not today. She took the day off," the woman replied. "She'll be back on Monday. Can I pass something on?" "No, I'll call you back myself." I was puzzled. She wasn't at work, didn't call me, and didn't mention that she had plans for the day. I called her cell phone, and it went straight to voicemail, so I left a message. "Hello, Carol. Just wanted to invite you to dinner today. I miss our dates and would like to take you somewhere nice and show everyone how beautiful you are. Please call me back, and I will arrange everything." I usually came home by 7 or later. She was probably expecting me then, but I was angry when she didn't call back until 6 p.m. It was too late to arrange anything for Jenny. "Hi, Mark," she said cheerfully. "Sorry I missed your call, honey." "I wanted to invite you to dinner," I sighed. "I guess it's too late now." "Oh, I'm so sorry, honey. I had to meet with a client, you know. It took so long and I couldn't call back." "Okay then, see you at home." "Yes, love you. And I you." This conversation was strange. Meet with a client. When did Carol start meeting clients? Her colleague didn't mention it. Why take a day off? And why was her phone switched off? I rarely called during the day, so she had no reason to expect my call, but it all looked suspicious. I took the pizza and just went home. When I arrived, Carol and Jenny were waiting for me. Jenny was happy about the pizza, and Carol apologized for missing my call. I didn't ask her questions, but it was strange and made me think bad things. That evening, Carol told me that there was a big party at the Royal Hotel that weekend, and she wanted to go. "This will be wonderful, Mark," she exclaimed, before noticing my dark look and adding, "Well, don't look at me like that." "I know what you're thinking," she said quickly. "Don't worry, honey, it won't cost you anything. My company pays for dinner and drinks. This is something like a PR campaign to attract customers. There will be live music, dancing, and everything. We'll have fun." "This weekend? Are you sure we don't have other plans?" I asked. Carol made a stupid grimace and laughed. "Well, stop it, you bore. You know we don't have any plans. We don't go anywhere. And don't worry, you won't have to spend a penny." I listened to her enthusiastic stories about the party. I was hoping I could find a way to avoid this, but she had already made up her mind. I just hoped everything would go well. Despite my reluctance, I even began to look forward to the party. My wife is very attractive and cheerful. I'd like to take her out for a nice dinner and maybe a dance. We really needed to spend time together, and perhaps this public celebration was that occasion. How wrong I was. The night before the party, she told me the rest of the story. She was mentioning the details of the party when suddenly she said in a suspicious tone, "And you know Jim will be there too, dear." "Jim? Damn it, I didn't know that." We were finishing dinner and Jenny was already in her room. Carol simply looked at her plate, stirring her food with a fork. Yes, dear. Jim said he'll be there too. I exclaimed in surprise. Did you talk to him? When? She looked surprised for a moment, but quickly pulled herself together. I heard about it from someone at work, she said without looking up. Why will Jim be there? He seems to be dating one of our clients. You mean that woman who was at his party? No, not with her. With someone else, it seems. Jim will be there, I repeated angrily. Then I asked, tell me the truth, Carol. Have you talked to him about the party? She looked at me with a guilty expression and muttered, no, not really. I just heard something. Maybe, I don't remember. He called you, didn't he? I accused, feeling a knot in my stomach. I think, maybe, she said, her demeanor suddenly changing to irritation. Yes, he called me. So? You know I can't stand that bastard, I growled. And now I find out that you're talking to him behind my back. That's not true, she replied. He's our friend. He just called to say he would be there too and hoped we would come. I stood up with an angry expression on my face. I threw the leftover food into the trash and rinsed the plate. This is just wonderful, I chuckled. After everything that happened, you're talking to that bastard behind my back. He's our friend, Mark, my friend too, she said defensively. He's not my friend, and you call him and probably secretly meet with him behind my back. Her eyes looked straight at me as she said sharply, you can't tell me who to hang out with. I am a grown woman and can choose my own friends. I just wanted to let you know in advance that he'll be there. I was just being polite and didn't want it to come as a surprise to you and make you think it was a setup. Don't you understand? Yes, I understand everything perfectly. I already told you that I don't want you to communicate with him. Apparently, you don't care about my feelings. This is not true. Just don't communicate with him, you hear? No, damn it, Mark. I will communicate with him if I want, she replied sharply. He's a friend, and I'm not going to leave him. If you want to ignore Jim, I can't stop you. But I won't turn my back on my friend. So that's it. Yes, she said sympathetically, placing her hand on mine. I don't want you to be angry. I want my husband back. Please come with me to this party. All my friends will be there. This is important to me, dear. I left it as is. I was about to go, but I didn't like it. The night of the party, I took Jenny to her friend's house. She was going to stay the night so Carol and I could party until late in the evening. Carol spent most of the evening getting ready. She did her hair and makeup. All I had to do was put on my suit and shoes, which took me about 10 minutes. Carol must have been in the bedroom for over an hour. When she came down, she looked amazing in a short black cocktail dress that emphasized her luxurious curves 100%. Immediately, a dark thought crept into my head. Where did you get this dress? I've never seen it before. Carol shot me a mocking grin and giggled. I bought it with my own money, Mark. So don't worry about where it came from. I make money too, you know, although not as much as you. And I bought the shoes too, if you're interested. I tried to suppress my anger, but it was difficult. Her long, slender legs were exposed by the short hem of her skirt. The high heels made her calves tense every time she took a step. The dress had a plunging neckline that showed off a bit of cleavage. Are you ready? She asked, taking my hand. Let's go out on the porch and wait for Jim. My jaw dropped. Jim, I exclaimed in surprise. What do you mean? Jim will come pick us up and take us there, she said, as if I should have already known about it. That way you can drink if you want. BB, but why? I stuttered. That's nonsense. We can drive there ourselves. I don't need to go with him. Carol held my gaze and spoke with determination. I already talked to him, and he is already on his way here. Did you talk to him? Oh my God, but why? I wasn't sure you'd go, she said, looking at me with her blue eyes. You were such a troublemaker at the last event that I wasn't sure you wouldn't let me down again. You took Jenny away, and I was afraid you'd just ditch me. There was no way I wanted to miss this event tonight. So, in case you change your mind, I called Jim, and he said he would take me. Will he take you? Was he ready to take you without me? No, I mean, I didn't want to miss this, Mark. I was furious. As I suspected, Carol was making plans with that bastard behind my back again. It was exactly the same as last time. I know you didn't want to go, she explained in a calm tone. I thought you might try to let me down and just not go. Jim is a gentleman, and he said he'd take me if you didn't come. So he's on his way here. If you want to go, be ready in 10 minutes, Mark, or we're leaving without you. Damn it, I blurted out, getting more and more angry. So you weren't going to wait for me, were you? Well, why don't you and Jim just go without me? Maybe I didn't want to go. Carol's expression became furious like I had never seen before. Her cheeks were red, and she was furious. She huffed angrily, stood up, and walked into the kitchen. Do whatever you want, asshole, she shouted over her shoulder. I heard Carol pour herself a glass of wine in the kitchen. I took a deep breath and shrugged, trying to make sense of this latest turn of events. I went to the bathroom to wash my face and calm down. While I was there, the doorbell rang, and I knew Jim had arrived. Carol must have let him in, and I heard her talking, probably about me. I didn't hear what Jim said, but I was angry that he was interfering in our lives again. I wanted to go out and confront this man, but instead I just went downstairs to smooth out the bad atmosphere. I found them already in Jim's BMW with Carol sitting in the front seat next to him. I walked up to the car, and he rolled down the window with a smile. Hi, Mark. I'm glad you and Carol are coming over tonight. He held out his hand for a handshake as Carol watched intently. I think a month of arguing with my wife has worn me out. She had taken me by surprise tonight, and I wasn't mentally prepared for another angry confrontation, and perhaps another month without sex or even affection. I bit my tongue and decided to do my best. I'll have to talk to Carol about this later. No hard feelings, right? Jim said pleasantly. Yes, of course, I answered weakly, ignoring his hand. With Carol already in the front seat, I was forced to sit in the back. Jim tried to explain something about how he hoped we would work things out and have a good evening. I sat behind them, seething with anger, wondering if I should have come at all. Carol chatted incessantly and didn't even turn around to look at me. Jim kept apologizing the whole way, saying he was worried we'd be late and that it was on the way for him. I simply nodded in reluctant agreement. The evening was a disaster. Of course, Carol and Jim had a great time. She looked very sexy in her short black cocktail dress and stiletto heels. Jim also looked elegant and handsome in his expensive tuxedo. I looked dull in my usual blue suit. All of Carol's friends were very interested in the fact that Jim and Carol came together. I was barely noticed while my wife enjoyed the attention they received every time they danced. I spent the evening mostly alone. Dinner was okay. We sat at a large table with several other couples. Carol sat between Jim and me and spent time talking to everyone except me. She asked me 3 or 4 simple questions during dinner, while her attention was clearly on Jim. He tried to include me in the conversation a couple of times, but I hardly responded. When the music started, Carol allowed me to dance a few times. She didn't look happy about it. I tried to keep her close while slow dancing, but she kept her distance, saying I better behave myself or I wouldn't get any sex for the rest of the month. It was cruel. My wife can be a vindictive bitch. Judging by the looks she gave me, I knew she was angry and wasn't going to give in. Carol spent a lot of time on the dance floor with several other guys, and especially Jim. She's very popular among her coworkers, and I can't blame the guys for wanting to hug her. The black dress emphasized her phenomenal figure, her firm breasts, round ass, and long, sexy legs. I could only look at her with envy from the table, hoping that I would have a chance to wrap her long, slender legs around my waist and have sex with her tonight. Well, that didn't happen. Jim eventually drove us home, and Carol and he hugged for a long time at the front door. When she came to bed, she was cold again, so I just fell asleep while she washed and cleaned herself in the bathroom. It was still cold between Carol and me. The next day, she was a little hungover. so I drove Jenny to her soccer games myself. She won her game, and we went to a pizzeria to celebrate with her team. I called Carol at home to see if she wanted to join us, but no one answered. I tried her mobile phone, but it also started recording. This surprised me a little. Maybe she was still tired and resting. When I brought Jenny home, Carol was in the kitchen talking on her cell phone. She smiled as she spoke. But when she saw me, her smile disappeared, and she quickly said something and hung up. Carol communicated normally with our daughter, but when I tried to kiss her, she pulled away and gave me a stern look. Carol still treated me coldly, but we talked about normal things like the girls' schedules, household chores, and stuff. But a distinct lack of warmth was noticeable. I tried to kiss her and touch her, but she was not interested. Work also gave me problems. My boss made me work late almost every evening, so I guess I wasn't home as much as I would have liked. One evening, I came home early to find Jim in the kitchen drinking coffee with Carol. I almost exploded, but they barely reacted when I entered. When I asked him why he was there, he looked a little unsure until Carol mentioned that she needed to get some boxes from the attic, and since I wasn't home, she asked him to help. Jim nodded and said it was on the way home from work, so it wasn't a problem. I accepted her explanation and went upstairs to shower. When I came down, he was no longer there. I've had another tough week at work. It bothered me so much that I was in despair, trying to remain calm when I finally returned home. It looks like Carol has welcomed Jim back into our home. Any complaint I made about this caused a huge scandal. Several times when I came home late, I learned that Jim had already had dinner with my family. As I ate the leftovers, Jenny very happily told me that Jim had given her a new pair of sneakers. Another time, she said he bought her a jacket. Every time she relayed this information to me, she seemed delighted to have him there. Carol, too. One evening, I came home to find that Carol had prepared a wonderful meal. Jim was there again. Everyone was chatting loudly when I entered. Carol glanced at me without saying a word, as if daring me to make a scene. When I didn't, they went back to their conversation, ignoring me as I sat down at the table. It was then that I began to feel like a third wheel, essentially a stranger in my own home. Carol and I talked, but barely. There was no sex. I couldn't help but feel that Carol really didn't care whether I was around or not. If Jim was with us when I came home, he would act friendly and ask me about work. He pretended to want to know how things were going. So I answered, not wanting to cause a scandal because of his presence. But I soon began to hate how often he visited us and how joyfully my whole family seemed to welcome him there. One evening after a particularly long visit, I took Jim out into the backyard to talk to him. I expressed to him that I was uncomfortable with him visiting us so often. I told him that if he was going to come over, I wanted him to call ahead because it was just polite to call me first. He listened silently, looking at me with a strange, indifferent expression on his face. He said no problem, that he didn't want to cause any problems, and that he would respect my wishes from now on. I thought that was all. How wrong I was. That evening, as Carol and I went to bed, I remembered how she reacted during dinner, seeming to be in a great mood, chatting and laughing at what Jim was saying. I also thought about my conversation with Jim. I worked a lot late into the night, and Carol and I hardly spent time together. Something inside me told me that I needed to get closer to my beautiful wife again on a physical level. Since she was in such a good mood, I thought that tonight was the evening to start repairing our relationship. After a great dinner, I helped my wife with the cleaning. She was in an unusually good mood. We talked normally, which was rare. Jenny went to bed, and I followed my wife into the bedroom. I began to subtly hint at sex to my wife. I knew that she understood that I was horny, but she didn't answer. She didn't push me away, but she didn't show any interest in my hints either. When she finished washing her face in the bathroom, she came out wearing a long flannel nightgown, a silent message that she was not interested in anything physical. Once she was under the covers, I moved closer and pressed myself against her flannel-clad body. My hand rested on her stomach, and I felt her tense. When I placed my hand on her full breasts, she immediately pushed my hand away and turned on her side, facing away from me. Normally, I would just give up. But I was still upset about Jim and hadn't been with her for weeks. Jenny was asleep, and it wasn't that late. So I decided to ignore her refusal and continue, hoping she would change her mind. I clung to her hips, hugged her, and began to press myself against her round butt. "Honey, you look so sexy today." "I'm really horny," I told her quietly, starting to move my hips towards her. "Not today, Mark." When I didn't stop, she repeated. I said, "Not today. I'm tired. Maybe another time, okay?" I was hurt by her refusal. It has been several weeks since I enjoyed her delights, more than a month. I decided I wouldn't take no for an answer. "Come on, honey. It's been a while. You know how much you turn me on." She pushed my hand away and repeated, "Not today." I kept trying to hug her until she turned to me and said in a rather harsh tone, "You'll stop. I said I'm tired and I mean it." "What the hell, Carol?" I flared up. "You've been pushing me away for weeks now. What, am I a monk?" "I'm just tired. Please, don't make a big deal out of this." I sat up and threw off the blanket. I looked at her angrily. "What the hell is going on, Carol?" I turned on the light next to our bed and said, "We haven't made love in over a month. You've been cold and angry for weeks. Is something wrong with you? With me? You may have forgotten, but I'm still your husband, and you must talk to me." I think my angry tone and stern expression finally got through to her. She turned and looked at me, her blue eyes sparkling with anger. "You bastard," she blurted out. "I said I'm tired, but you don't seem to care about my feelings, right? I take care of the kids and the house, and I'm waiting for you at home. But you never take me out, you don't bring me flowers, or even you come home on time. And now you just want me, satisfy your dirty desire, and go to bed." Dirty desire. What? I was caught off guard by her bitterness. I recoiled from her angry outburst as she sat up and started pointing her finger at me. "You selfish bastard, I've sacrificed a lot, and... Okay, Mark, you want some sex? That's it. That's what you need to leave me alone." In one swift movement, Carol lifted her nightgown to her waist, lay back down, closed her eyes, and spread her legs. I looked at her, trying to understand who this evil bitch was lying next to me. "Well," she said, looking at me, "don't sit there with a stupid look on your face. That's all you wanted, right? A piece of me. So get on with it, and quickly so I can fall asleep." I was stunned, filled with mixed emotions. Of course, I was excited by her naked body, but the look of hatred on her face put me off. She opened her eyes and looked at me like I was some kind of lustful old man. There was no love there. I decided to just lie back down and forget about it. But it seemed Carol didn't want to stop. She was on a wave and was not going to give up. "Come on, Mark," she urged with a strange smile. "What's wrong, darling? Lost your courage when your wife is ready? Are you a coward? I'm sure Jim wouldn't turn me down. You're such a loser, damn it. You can't get aroused unless a woman is completely in agreement. Well, darling, you are ready." She smiled evilly and giggled. "That's what I thought." She closed her legs and pulled the blanket over herself. I heard her whisper loud enough for me to hear, "Damn loser." Her last remark completely angered me. She had been cruel to me before, but never like this. Something inside me broke. "You're a bitch," I shouted. "I guess you're Jim's bitch now." I jumped out of bed and headed towards the door. Behind me, she screamed, "You are a bigger. At least he's not as much loser as you." I ran out of the room before I did something rash. I almost tore the door off its hinges when I slammed it. I knew the whole house shook, and I felt sorry that Jenny must have woken up from the screams. My anger almost eclipsed my common sense. I've never been so angry with her before. It was even worse than that night after the charity event. The next morning, I got up still angry. Carol didn't talk about what happened that night, and neither did I. She made breakfast for Jenny while I left the house without saying a word. I barely slept and was furious leaving the house. I knew there was something seriously wrong with my marriage. A few days later, I came home from work and saw Jim's car in the driveway. I was unhappy about this. I got home from work on time, hoping Carol and I could talk tonight, have dinner, and have a family night without him. So I was quite upset to see him here again. Since Carol and I had a fight, we haven't spoken. I knew she was unhappy about this quarrel, and so was I. I was hoping that we would eventually talk about this and get through it, but we didn't talk. I thought that maybe this would happen tonight. When I saw his car and realized he hadn't called, it bothered me. I just had to remind him of his promise later. But at the same time, I knew how much Carol loved having him around, and I hoped that his presence would somehow soften our cool relationship. A fun visit with a friend over dinner might do the trick. Maybe Carol and I could even have sex if she calmed down. I walked into the house and was surprised to see them on the couch together. "Hi, honey," I called. I looked at him and said sharply, "Jim." "Hi, Mark," he replied in a hushed tone. "What's for dinner?" I asked my wife, taking off my jacket. Carol looked at me blankly. She said through me, "There's roast beef and vegetables in the fridge. You can heat them up in the microwave." She spoke calmly, without emotion, pointing to the chair. "But first, can you sit here, Mark? We need to talk to you." Us? It was strange. I remained standing, surprised by her strange, monotonous voice and distant expression on her face. I began to wonder what she wanted to tell me that was so important. Maybe someone died, she got fired, or maybe she's pregnant. "What's wrong, honey? Where's Jenny?" "She's spending the night at Becky's." "On a school night? You didn't tell me." Ignoring my question, Carol asked, "Would you like a drink, Mark? Maybe a glass of wine or a beer?" "No, I'm fine." Her face showed no emotion. I also noticed how close she and Jim were sitting on the couch. They were usually sitting at the kitchen table when I came home. Therefore, such closeness in a sitting position was unusual. Carol took a sip of wine and then turned to me. "We need to discuss something, Mark. Why don't you sit down?" She pointed to the chair again and glanced at Jim. He answered her with a slight nod. "What's going on here?" I blurted out, feeling very uncomfortable. "Please sit down," she said more insistently, pointing to the chair. With serious apprehension, I sat down in the chair opposite them. "Mark, there's no easy way to say this." She sighed, and the words flowed out. "You know I love you and Jenny, but things aren't the same between us. I know you work hard for the family and you're a good father, but there's something wrong with our marriage." "What?" I whispered, my throat tightening. "In our marriage?" I looked at my former best friend for clarification and saw him looking at the floor. Carol took another sip, looked at him, and continued. "I'm not happy, Mark, and haven't been for a while. I know you're not happy either. You know we haven't been intimate in months. Our sex life is terrible, and any affection between us seems to have disappeared." I was stunned that she would mention our lack of sex to Jim. It was a very personal issue, and I wanted to keep it that way. "God, Carol," I muttered. "It's not something to discuss in public, you know. I don't think Jim wants to hear it." Carol looked at me, her eyes narrowed. I almost saw a glimmer of pity as she considered my answer. "I'm afraid so, Mark," she answered indifferently. "You see, Jim knows exactly how I feel. I've been dating him for the last few months, and we've grown closer. We're closer than I expected, and closer than you and I have ever been." I felt the floor collapse. I gulped. What the hell? This is some kind of sick joke, right? If looks could kill, Jim would already be dead. Carol simply took another sip of wine, shrugged her shoulders indifferently, and sighed. Her look, full of pity, enraged me. "It's true, Mark. I'm sorry." "How long, Carol?" "Please sit down, Mark. We're all adults here. Let's be civil," Carol said with amazing composure. With my hands shaking with rage, I asked, "How long, bitch?" If I expected her to respond with anger to my insult, I was mistaken. I think she rehearsed her speech because she was in complete control of her emotions. Her beautiful face did not express any feelings. "I know this is hard for you, Mark, and I never wanted this to happen." She spoke calmly, adding, "But it happened. When you and I grew apart, Jim was there to help and support me. And get you into bed, cheater." Without giving in to provocation, Carol said, "Yes, well, anyway, Mark, he was a real friend to comfort me. I admit that we are dating. Or rather, we can't hide it anymore. We didn't want you to learn it from someone else, so we had to tell you the truth about us. I've lost control. My brain was buzzing with emotions. She's cheating on me. My beautiful wife and my former best friend, former friend now. You bitch, you lying cheater," I shouted in despair. My face turned red and my expression became cruel. In a bitter tone, I asked, "Tell me, my faithful, lying wife, has he already slept with you?" Carol tensed and looked a little shocked before giving me a cold look. "Yes, Mark. Jim and I are lovers." I looked at Jim and blurted out, "You're a traitor. You took advantage of our family problems. I thought you were my friend. I trusted you, and you do this. You slept with my wife, and now you're taking her away from me, you bastard." I started moving towards them, and Jim suddenly stood up. His tall, massive silhouette towered over me. He held out his hands in a protective gesture. "Please, Mark, just calm down." He told me, "We didn't plan it, buddy. It just happened." "Don't call me buddy, you bastard. You're not my friend." "Come on, Mark. You know I care about you. I feel terrible about all of this, about how everything turned out. But I love Carol. I can't help it. I want her to be happy, and she definitely is not as happy as you are now. You're not happy either, to be honest." "You don't know shit, motherfucker," I screamed, almost out of control. "You're welcome, Mark," Carol said, getting up from her seat. "I know this will be hard for you, honey, but we can't stay married. This is really something I have to do. Jim will support me and Jenny, and—" "Jenny, my Jenny," I shouted. She could have hit me with a 2-meter stick, and it would have had less effect than her words. "She's your daughter," Carol insisted. "You don't have to give her up. She's yours and always will be yours." "You're welcome, Mark," Jim added pleadingly. "Let's be reasonable, okay? What happens between Carol and I won't affect your parentage. Jenny just needs her mother to take care of her. You'll have all the visits you want. We won't tear you away from her. But I love Carol, and she loves me. But when she is with us, she will be very well looked after, I assure you." "Friend," I spat. "What a friend you are, you bastard. Don't ever call me that again." "Come on, Mark. You may not believe me now, but we can work things out. You know I care about you, but I love Carol. I know this will take time, and I will help you as much as I can." He sighed and said, "We can't help that we fell in love with each other. Just accept it, and everything will be much easier. I know you don't believe me now, but we both still care about you. I'll help you get through it. And Jenny will always know that you are her father. I will not interfere with your relationship with her." I was still furious from the humiliating defeat. Carol looked on, sobbing a little, but her expression was more pitiful than sympathetic. Jim just stood there, waiting for my next move. I knew he trained regularly. Of course, he had a lot of time for this, being a bachelor and having no family responsibilities. My work and family responsibilities left me with almost no free time. I was out of shape as I was too busy working long hours to provide for my family. I could never beat him in a fair fight, but my anger overshadowed my common sense, and I was not going to give up. I pretended to calm down and stood up. Straightening their clothes and taking a deep breath, they both watched me warily. Carol was wearing high heels, so she was almost my height. Jim was much taller and looked down at me as I gave him a look full of hatred. Well, this certainly came as a surprise. The two people I trust more than anything in the world just stabbed me in the back. "Sorry," Carol sobbed. "I just couldn't let you continue to think that everything was fine with us. We couldn't do this to you." "Yes, sure," I whispered dejectedly. "Well, damn you both." "You're welcome, Mark," said Jim. "I feel terrible about all this, you know. but we respect you too much to just go behind your back. We still care about you." "Yes, I see," I said sarcastically. "Understand, please," Carol said with sad eyes. "I didn't mean for it to happen. It just happened. I'm so sorry, honey." She wanted to hug me, but I surprised them both by pushing her back onto him. She staggered and fell onto Jim's chest, and he caught her before she fell. The moment he caught her, he was vulnerable. I quickly clenched my fist and hit him in the head with all my strength. At the last moment, he saw it, and his eyes widened. His face contorted as my knuckles slammed into his nose. Carol screamed in panic, "No!" He was dazed, but still conscious. I attacked him. He took several hits to the head and then pushed me away. "You bastard," he shouted in a strange nasal tone. He started to walk towards me, but Carol held his hand. "No, Jim, don't," she screamed, holding on to him. "Come on, wife snatcher." I mocked, trying to challenge him to a fight. "You can take her away behind my back, but you're just a coward in a fair fight. Do you need a woman to protect you, you coward? Can't fight on your own? Hiding behind her skirt, you coward? What's wrong with you, loser?" His eyes burned with rage, but Carol clung to his hand. I think he knew he would end up winning by getting my wife. "Damn you, Mark," he finally said. "You're happy she's here to protect you. Don't say that again, or I'll kick your ass." "Big words, coward," I barked, taking a fighting stance. Jim relaxed and allowed Carol to pull him away. They both walked towards the exit in silence until Carol turned to me angrily. "It wasn't supposed to be like this." Carol barked. "We tried to soften the blow, Mark, but you decided to use force." "Damn you both," I said bitterly. "Oh, looks like you already did, bitch." Carol's face twisted with anger, but she didn't say anything. Then I noticed 2 suitcases by the door. Jim took one and headed towards the exit, giving me angry looks. Carol picked up the smaller one and followed him. She stopped once, looking around, as if she wanted to say something. But instead, she simply turned and left. When they left, I rushed to the car, and at full speed Rusty drove to Becky's house. I parked and ran to the door, knocking in a panic. Becky's mother opened the door with a sad expression on her face. "Hi, Mark," she said in a sad voice. "I know why you're here. Carol called a few minutes ago and talked to Jenny. Jenny said her mom told her to leave the house and go somewhere. I don't know what she told her. I think they're taking her now, but they didn't tell me where." "Did you know about this?" I asked in bewilderment. "Well, not everything. Carol asked me to keep it a secret, and I did so." Then she looked at me with the same pity as my wife. "I'm really sorry about all this. I always thought you and Carol had a wonderful marriage. I didn't know about all your problems." "Yeah, I didn't know either," I answered angrily. "Do you know where Jenny went? Does she have any friends nearby? I need to find her." "I don't know, Mark. I'm sorry. I would have told you if I knew, you know it." "Nonsense," I growled. "She's cheating on me and you're covering for her. I know that now. I wonder if your husband knows that you're covering for a woman who's cheating on her husband. Maybe you're cheating too and you're covering for each other. I don't have time for cheating bitches, so don't ever talk to me again." She was angry and glared at me before slamming the door in my face. I left her house feeling dead inside. The next day, I was able to go to work somehow. After a few hours, I started to feel a little more normal. The intensive work of an accountant ceased to be a tedious duty. It became a blessing, something that distracted me from my problems. After work, I went home and tried to collect my thoughts. The first thing I did was call Jenny. "Hello, Dad," she answered immediately. "Jenny, oh my God. I miss you so much, honey. I want to pick you up and bring you home, honey." There was an awkward pause. "Where are you?" I'm with my mom," she answered in a tense tone. "Mom said I need to tell you that I'm okay and—" "Where are you? I want to pick you up." "I can't, Dad. Mom and Uncle Jim said." "Stop. He's not your uncle. Don't ever call that traitor uncle Jenny." I spoke in anger, not thinking about how it would sound to Jenny. I, I, I'm sorry, Jenny. I'm just so upset, honey. I apologized, and Jenny started crying. Please, honey, just tell me where you are. I'll pick you up. Suddenly, the connection was lost. I called her again, but the call went to voicemail. I slammed the table in frustration. Without a doubt, Carol filled her head with all sorts of lies. I rushed to the car and drove like crazy to Jim's house. I ran to the door and started banging on it. But no one answered. I checked the garage and saw that his SUV was not there, and there was no BMW either. I walked around the house, looking into the windows, but didn't see anyone. Suddenly, a police car pulled up. The officer came out, frowning at me, and called me over. I'm looking for my daughter. I told him before he could ask. Yes, he said, looking at me without sympathy. The call came from the neighbors. They said that someone was snooping around the house. I also heard about your separation and problems with your wife. Who told you? I said warily. Does it matter? He said. You must leave. Now, you are not welcome here. If you return, it will be trespassing on private property. I will have to handcuff you and take you to the station for questioning. I was almost beside myself. I took a deep breath and got into the car. Jim must have taken them somewhere far away from me. They've outsmarted me again. Of course, I hired a lawyer, and he told me all the bad news. I will have to divide all our assets, including the house. Carol will no doubt get custody of Jenny, despite her infidelities. I might have a chance at custody if the judge found me to be a good parent and if Jenny agreed to live with me. This was my salvation. Despite the short telephone conversation with her, I knew that she loved me. I was there when she was sick. I took her to extracurricular activities. I went to school for parent-teacher meetings. I was there for all the significant events in her life. But now I was alone. Carol had Jim to keep her company. I needed someone to help me get through this terrible situation. I needed Jenny in my life, and I knew she would be there for me, so we could be some kind of family again. I was served with divorce papers at home. Carol knew my work schedule and must have told her lawyer. There was a letter attached to the documents saying that she didn't want to embarrass me by handing them over to me at work. Damn it, I didn't care about it. The document stated that our finances would be split 50-50ths. We could sell the house and split the proceeds, or she could buy out my share and live in the house with Jenny. According to her lawyer, it was her preference to live in our house, so Jenny could continue to attend the same school. We'll both keep our cars. There will be no child support, but I will have to pay for custody of Jenny. My lawyer said it was a fair division. I didn't agree. She ended up leaving me and cheating on me for months. Jenny was my daughter, and I wanted full custody. He said I was stupid, but would submit a counteroffer based on my instructions. Meanwhile, that bastard Jim took my family on vacation to Florida. I never found out exactly where. Jenny called me. Our conversations were tense, and she seemed nervous. I tried to tell her that I loved her and that I needed her, but I sounded desperate. No wonder I was desperate to regain some shred of self-respect. With my family gone, I went to work. There was always work for a chartered accountant, and I worked as much overtime as I could. I never knew when Carol and Jenny returned from Florida. I guess they didn't want me to know. On the day of our trial, I came with my lawyer, and Carol and Jim came with theirs. I gave him a death glare, trying to kill him with my eyes. He simply turned away and did not respond to my gaze. Carol looked indifferent. It seemed that the breakup of our family and her failed marriage were already a thing of the past. When the time came for the final decision, the judge took Jenny into his office and spoke with her for almost an hour. I kept asking my lawyer why it was taking so long. I knew she must be missing me right now. I haven't seen her for weeks. She just had to tell the judge that she wanted to stay with me in our home, and I could finally move on with my life. The judge finally came out and announced his final decision. He said that it was a difficult decision, and that neither Carol nor I should ignore how difficult it was for a 14-year-old girl to make such a choice. Jenny will end up living with Carol and that bastard. I almost fell into a coma and hardly heard a word after that. I left the courtroom before he finished, and the judge yelled at me to get back to my seat. I ignored this idiot and just wandered into the hallway. When I finally came to my senses, my lawyer came out and told me the rest of the judge's decision. I'll have to pay guardianship fees and either buy out Carol's share of the house or sell it and split the money. He seemed happy with the decision and was even proud that I wouldn't have to pay child support and that Carol should have given me generous visitation rights. "You came out of it well, Mark," he said, patting me on the back. "It could have been a lot worse." I was speechless. Carol left the courtroom and gave me a pitying look. Jim simply left without saying a word. He took her hand and led my unfaithful wife out of court. I never saw Jenny. I was in a daze as I left the building. In the parking lot, Carol came up to me. Jim was a few meters away, looking guilty. I noticed that he still had the bandage on his nose. "This could work, Mark," Carol said kindly. "I know this isn't what you wanted, but Jenny loves you and wants to be with you. She'll live with us, of course, but you can see her whenever you want. Jim and I want you in Jenny's life, and we'll do our best to ensure a smooth transition for you." I just looked at her in disbelief. Has she gone crazy? When I didn't respond, Carol said in a soothing tone, "Please, Mark. I know this is difficult. We want you to make this decision. Let's work together to make Jenny's life as smooth as possible. It's for her good, you know." Finally, my mind returned. I looked at Jim, who was looking at me blankly. Then I looked Carol straight in the eyes and said with as much anger as possible, "Fuck you, bitch." I turned to Jim and said, "Go to hell and take him with you." Carol's expression changed to irritation. Jim heard me and looked at me angrily. My lawyer pulled me by the arm and tried to take me away. "Come on, Mark. This won't help. Let's leave." Carol said annoyedly, "Damn it, Mark. Stop being a child. You have to help Jenny for her own sake. It's not easy for her either. She's your daughter, and she needs your support now more than ever." "No, bitch. She's your daughter now, not mine," I said bitterly. "Don't ever mess with me again, you bitch, neither you nor Jenny, and keep your lover away from me too. If you ever come near me again, I will." "Stop," my lawyer shouted before I could say more. He grabbed my arm tightly and said, "Just stop talking, Mark. It won't help. Wait until you calm down, damn it." Carol had tears in her eyes as she pleaded, "She's your daughter, Mark. She needs your support now." "Fuck you, bitch," I told her. I looked at Jim, who was looking at me angrily. "And you too, you asshole, my former good friend. What a laugh." My lawyer led me away while I screamed, "Just go and sleep with my unfaithful wife, you bastard. Have her as much as you want, you traitorous creature." Everyone around us was watching and listening. An officer came out to see what was going on, and I finally stopped screaming. They dragged me to the car while my lawyer tried to explain the details of the decision. I heard that I had to pay her some money every month for Jenny, and that I had to find money for a house and a few other things. At some point, I just pulled my hand away and ran to the car, sobbing. The next day, the restrictions on our finances were lifted. Carol took half of our savings and investments, all the money I had saved for our family. There is something left for me, but not enough to do more than just survive. I received a formal letter asking me to either move out or provide her equity in our home if I planned to sell it. I quickly replied that I would sell it. With a police officer escorting her, Carol returned the next day and took her car and all her personal belongings. She also took most of the furniture I paid for. When she finished choosing her things, she tried to talk to me. I told her, "Fuck you, bitch," and left. The policeman warned me to be polite, but I didn't care about him. When they left the house, Carol had tears in her eyes. She walked to the front yard and asked the officer to wait. She turned to me and said she wanted to talk. I walked out into the front yard and the policeman stayed nearby. We stood in silence for a while. I just waited with a blank expression on my face while my wife tried to collect her thoughts. "Please don't hate me, Mark," she said, wiping away her tears. I know you're not happy right now. It's not easy, but things will get better in time. I wanted to scold her and tell her never. Instead, I remained silent and let her have her say. We were unhappy together, and you know it. She continued. Things were getting worse between us, and I just couldn't continue. She stopped sobbing and wiped her eyes. She sighed, and her expression became more determined. But Mark, what I really need to talk to you about is Jenny. I need your help. She's unhappy now. Our divorce was hard for her. I snorted, as if to show that it wasn't my fault. Carol noticed, but ignored my hint. Just listen to me, please, she begged. I spoke to her teacher, and she is having problems with her studies. Mark, she barely talks to me and doesn't go out with her friends. He sits in his room almost all the time. I'm worried. Jim and I know she needs you, and I need your help so she can live a good life, a life with both parents. Jim said he didn't. Don't ever mention him to me again. I instantly flared up. Go fuck yourself with that bastard who stole your wife, Carol. But never say his name in front of me. I never want to see him or hear about him ever. He's a sneaky liar, and you know it. He knew we were married, and he still pursued you. He pretended to be friendly and good. Then he seduced you with his money and fucked you behind my back. It wasn't like that, Mark. Not at all like that. That's exactly what happened, I objected angrily. I thought he was my friend. A friend doesn't do that. He's a cheater and a liar, and so are you. I said it too loudly, and the policeman approached, silently warning me to behave in a civilized manner. I noticed one of our neighbors came out to watch. Carol flinched at my words, but motioned to the policeman that everything was fine. Please, Mark, Carol said, trying to hold on. I really need your help with Jenny. She's upset. I've never seen her so offended. Ask the bastard to help. He's sleeping with you now. That's his problem. He is not her father. You are her father. She needs you now more than ever. You must think I'm a fool, but perhaps I really was a fool. At least it was. I was the stupid, naive husband that was so easy for you to cheat on. An idiot who thought that my friend truly respected me and that our marriage would last forever. I was an ignorant fool, Carol, so I understand where you're coming from. If I was so stupid while we were married, why not now? I laughed, then my expression turned stern. But now that I know about you, I'm not so stupid and naive anymore. Now I know how cunning and treacherous you and the bastard really were. How easily you lie. You must have had a good laugh at me, don't you? You had sex, and I was such a gullible fool. It's in the past, bitch. Now I hate you and wish you would just disappear. First you cheat with your friend, then you destroy our family, and now you need my help. What a laugh. Never again, bitch. Carol tensed, stunned by my accusations. Please, Mark. We never thought of you like that. I never wanted to hurt you, and neither did he didn't want to either. But all this is in the past. We broke up. But we still have a daughter, and we need to get along for her sake. Think about Jenny. I looked at her like she was a piece of shit. Yes, of course, I chuckled. Damn, you are truly worth it, you changer. You had sex behind my back, and now you see the consequences. Not as much fun as you expected, huh, bitch? Carol winced and let out a quiet sob. The policeman stared at me. Let me ask you a question, my unfaithful wife, I said in a calm tone. I just want to know how you can have a relationship with a man without moral principles. This question took her by surprise, and she stopped crying. What? Jim has morals. The man who has his best friend's wife, I grinned. First he seduces her, then he conducts a dirty affair behind his friend's back. Finally, he takes her away with the money, takes his daughter, and destroys his marriage. Do you call such a person moral? He is exactly what he shouldn't be. It never happened. I interrupted her. How can you even trust such a person, Carol? I trust him. She stammered, losing her balance. Is it true? I asked sarcastically. A man who steals his best friend's wife and daughter? A man who uses his money to buy her love? Carol glanced at the policeman and said uncertainty, "He's not like that, Mark, and you know it. And yes, I trust him." But her eyes darted around, and I saw that I touched her to the quick. "I don't understand how," I continued confidently. "You know what kind of person he is. Playboy. He has money, and he has many women. You're just another entry in a long line of easy pickings. I can't tell you how many times he bragged to his friends at the bar about his latest conquests. You're just his latest prey. By the way, dear, have you been checked yet?" "Have you checked?" She looked puzzled. "On STDs and AIDS. He communicates a lot with different women, and perhaps he picked up something unpleasant and passed it on to you. For my own safety, I checked right after you left to see him. You know he's a real player and gets a lot of different sex." "He's not like that anymore, Mark," she replied. "Of course he is. You've seen him in action. Girls flock to this bastard. He has many girlfriends. I wouldn't be surprised if he already has someone on his side. Do you know where he is now? He is at work." "Of course, at work. Is that what he told you?" "Yes, he's at work, and maybe he took time off for an affair. He works with a lot of beautiful girls, you know, like the one at his party. You're too trusting, Carol. I know he still goes out on his own and probably meets a lot of cute girls. Some are younger and more beautiful than you. You're not getting any younger, you know. He might already be tired of you. He loves variety. He needs a lot of beautiful women to be satisfied." Carol's eyes narrowed, and I added with a grin, "Hell, maybe he's having sex on his lunch break now. I wouldn't be surprised. You know he's done this before, right? You really got checked, right?" Carol became increasingly irritated by my insinuations. She never seemed to think about Jim's other women before. "No, I don't. But he told me we're exclusive. He loves me, you know." "Oh, really?" I laughed at how naive she seemed. "He says this to many women. Jim is a player, honey. You know his past. He probably wouldn't tell you that he was sleeping with other women. Not yet." Her eyes suddenly became uncertain. My accusations were on target. Poor Carol wasn't as confident in her relationship as she was a few minutes ago. "Are you saying Jenny has a problem with our divorce? How will she feel when she finds out that you destroyed her family for a guy who cheated on you? That you betrayed our marriage, broke her father's heart, and ruined her life for a guy who destroys families? This will really help her deal with her problems. Come to your senses, you fool. This bastard is not the moral angel you think he is. Remember this the next time he goes on a so-called business trip." Carol blinked and suddenly turned pale. Her eyes darted around as if she didn't know what to say. I continued. "I've known him long enough," I said with a wicked smile. "You think he's a great guy, right? I know for sure that he cheated on his first wife. Cheated on her multiple times. Why shouldn't he do it again? After all, he's not even married to you. You're just a sexy girlfriend. Easy prey. I'm sure he'll hold back for a while to get his new, naive, trusting toy to forget about his lascivious ways, and then everything will return to normal." Her eyes sparkled with anger. She knew what I was doing, and she didn't like it. "He's not like that anymore," she said through clenched lips. "Yes, he dated a lot before we got together. He told me." "He told you exactly what you wanted to hear, right?" I laughed. "Tell a woman a few lies to satisfy her, and then do what you want. God, how stupid you are. How will Jenny ever respect you once she finds out?" I let that harpoon sink in, then chuckled. We laughed about that. We went out drinking, and when he got a little drunk, he would laugh and tell me what a fool Martha was. His ex-wife, remember her, Carol? The woman he married? He didn't respect her at all. He cheated on her from the very beginning of their marriage. He laughed at how easy it was to change. It was a joke, and he played around for years. Now he has you, another easily accessible fool. Everything repeats itself. "That's a lie," she spat. "Jim is not like that. He loves me. Just like he loved Martha. Admit it, Carol, you really have a wonderful boyfriend. A lying, cheating boyfriend who has already ruined one marriage. If he marries you, why not do it again?" Carol's fists clenched. Her eyes flashed lightning. That's a lie, Mark. Jim is a decent person. I know that. I saw the policeman smile out of the corner of his eye as he listened to me. He knew exactly what I was doing, undermining Carol's faith in him. She wavered between anger and confusion. She didn't believe I was right about Jim, but she couldn't just dismiss my arguments. "Just call Jenny, okay?" she finally blurted out. "She needs you now, Mark. You have visitation rights this weekend. You can pick Jenny up from school on Friday afternoon." "Forget it." "What?" I said, "Forget it. Now Jenny is your problem. I'm not going to let you and that bastard manipulate my visitation rights. Cancel at the last minute, ask to change dates for your convenience. Forget it, I don't trust you. And by the way," I said, pulling the check out of my pocket. It was issued to Carol with a note in the descriptive line. "What is this? You have to take her, Mark. She wants to see you." "Forget about visiting," I said in a voice as cold as ice. "Here is a check for the full amount of my custodial responsibilities forever. It also covers part of her college fund. Now that you and this bastard are her parents, deal with the consequences yourself. I don't want to have any more contact with you." Carol took the check and looked at it like it was poison. "Are you serious?" "Yes. But Mark, listen. Goodbye, Carol. You and your cheater deserve each other. Go to hell. Don't contact me anymore. Tell Jenny I'm sorry she left me too. I really thought she loved me enough. I loved her more than anything in the world, but seeing her often will only break my heart again and again. I'm moving on from both of you traitors, and if I ever see your bastard boyfriend again." I noticed that the policeman was listening, so I didn't finish my threat. I didn't want a law enforcement officer to hear a threat against them. Carol knew how I felt. I walked into the house and slammed the door, hearing my ex-wife mutter in despair. Nothing in our conversation went as she expected. By the end of the day, there were a dozen messages on my cell phone. I just deleted them without listening. I went to my provider and got a new number. I think it was a call from Jenny or Carol, but it was too painful for me to listen to anything they had to say. Over the next few days, I completed preparations for my new lifestyle. I went to the bank and withdrew all the money from my accounts and opened a new one. Then I went to a real estate agent and put my house on the market. The next day, I took out the rest of the furniture and rented a small, cheap, one-room apartment. Eventually, the house was sold, but the price was so low that we got almost nothing. I sent Carol the sales papers and a check for $500. I knew she was shocked and expected much more. I didn't hear from her because she didn't know my new number. I told her to contact me through my lawyer. He called me and told me Carol was upset about the price. I just laughed. He also said that Jenny called him almost every week. "Do you want to let her know how you are?" he asked me. "I know you're angry with your wife, but your daughter almost cried when I told her I couldn't give you your number. They made their choice. Now they have to live with it." Several days have passed since the sale of the house. At this point, all my plans were working. I wasn't sure how much Carol's family knew about our marital problems or Jim's family either. So I drafted an email detailing how my ex-best friend seduced my cheating wife behind my back, how he stole her from me, destroyed my family, and took my daughter. Of course, I embellished the story a little. No facts were wrong, and I made sure everything was true. But the way I phrased the story made him sound like the biggest creep ever. It also made my ex-wife Carol look like the biggest easy-to-get girl on the planet. He was a worthless bastard, and she was a lying, cheating bitch that no one could trust. I collected the email addresses of everyone we knew, everyone in Carol's family, her friends, Jim's family and friends, everyone from our church and a club Jim attended sometimes. I also found the names of all the employees and staff at Jim's car dealership and Carol's place of work as well. I even found some of his clients and included them. I inserted several unflattering remarks on Jim's Facebook page, his company's website, and any other person or organization they came into contact with. I pasted the document I had put together into an email to everyone, hit the send button, and let the shit fly. The next day, my lawyer called me, upset about the letters, and asked me to stop sending them. He said I could be sued for damages. I told him that the truth cannot be sued and sent him a copy of the letter for review. He said it was true, but the judge might think differently. I tried to keep Jenny safe and did not send anything to her school, her friends, or her friends' parents. But I knew they had heard about it, and Jenny was probably embarrassed at school when they confronted her about it. I went to the printer and ordered a bunch of leaflets about how Jim and my ex-wife betrayed me. I didn't use my name, but they would know who wrote it if anyone came across it. I went to Jim's car dealership in the middle of the night and hung them on every tree, telephone pole, and traffic light I could find. I also went to all the restaurants and placed them in the bathrooms. I knew some of their favorite places and made sure there were flyers there too. I even paid a few girls to place them in the women's restrooms. Within a few days, almost the entire city knew about the details of their dirty affair. I made sure everyone knew Jim was a salesman at a car dealership and avoided such a creep. By this time, my lawyer was receiving calls from all directions. He was unhappy with me, so I simply refused his services. He was glad about it. Later, I noticed that some of the leaflets had been taken down. I didn't care. I still had some left, and I posted them all over town, even around Jim's house, which I know made him very angry. After the divorce, I was almost broke. But now that I was working overtime, I was making some serious money. My cheap apartment cost very little, and I had so few financial obligations that my net worth began to increase rapidly. My salaries were now very large. After a few months, I had saved up quite a lot of money, and more kept coming. It's amazing how much money an accountant working 14 hours a day can make without having anything to spend it on. I hired a private detective. I didn't need the expensive monitoring program he offered. Instead, I just asked him to check Jim and my wife's schedules, so I knew where they were at any time of the day. Once I had a clear idea of their daily routine, I had enough information for the next part of my plan. Jim Simpson was wealthy, but not rich. Thanks to my campaign against them, rumors of the dastardly deeds of the traitors became common knowledge. Carol's job at an art gallery was also struggling. Sometimes I went on dates with women. It was more to take my mind off work than with any hope of romance. Carol seems to have killed that feeling in me. I never had any luck dating these women, and I didn't care. Sometimes I got women drunk and paid them to call Jim's house when they knew he wasn't there. I made it sound like a teenage prank, and it wasn't hard to get these women to agree. I even listened when they called and asked to talk to Jim. Carol answered and said that he was not at home. The girl would say things like, "Just tell him Kathy says hi," or "Tell him Mary will be ready tomorrow," or if I was really mean, "Let him know Mary will be ready tomorrow," a suspicious but vague hint. Carol simply slammed the phone down. But this raised doubts about her attitude towards Jim's loyalty. In the end, neither of them were true, and she knew it. I also hired a few guys to call Jim's car dealership and complain about him. Some stories included mentions of the big guy's past infidelities, how sneaky he seemed, anything that might raise doubts in his boss. I even got a couple of guys to complain that Jim was pursuing their wives. Of course, it was all fiction, but it must have worked because I heard that Jim was changing jobs. I also used the same play against Carol. I know they probably figured out that I was behind it all. But I knew that with their story, the seeds of doubt had already been sown. I spent most of my time working, and since I wasn't dating anyone, I had a lot of free time when I wasn't in the office. I spent time on the internet and started learning about short-term stock and options trading. Most people would never become interested in online trading, but I began to realize how much you can earn with a little knowledge. Opening an online account with a brokerage firm was easy. They had an instructional page on their website that I started looking into. The philosophy of short-term trading was a simple concept, but it involved risks. Online training sessions taught me how to limit risks and maximize rewards. I was amazed at how much money you could make with such a small startup capital. Learning the trading techniques took some time, and I lost money on some trades. But over time, I learned more and started making serious money, more than I earned from my job as an accountant. After 2 months, I had enough money to play, so I took the plunge and started trading options, which meant I could use a small amount of money to make a big profit. In my free time, I spent a lot of time on the internet, making trades that turned a profit in less than one day. After a couple of months, my account value was already over 6 figures. One evening, after work, I was drinking at a bar. I just stopped by for a minute and was surprised when Jim and Carol burst into the place together and confronted me. I think they found out where I lived and were following me. "What the hell are you doing?" Jim shouted furiously. Everyone in the bar turned to see what was happening. When a big guy, 6'2", screams, it's hard not to notice. "You bastard," he shouted, pointing his finger at me. "I know it's you who's ruining my life." Carol was next to him, nodding her head, looking at me as if she wanted to beat me up. "I don't know what you're talking about," I said innocently. Jim's face turned red. "You bastard, I have to kick your ass." "You idiot," Carol added angrily. "It's you, right? You're interfering with Jim's work and my work. Damn, Mark, you're a real asshole, you know." I just sat there grinning at them and laughing. "You two are a couple of paranoids." "You're ruining my job, you moron," Jim shouted. "You had my wife," I said, smiling. "I'm not your wife, you idiot," Carol screamed. "I left your sorry ass for Jim, and he's better than you for all I care." Jim intervened, shouting, "You better stop this shit now, or I'll sue you, you bastard." I behaved like a cucumber, and they were almost beside themselves. They must have been watching me to know I was here. I didn't plan this, but it worked in my favor. I began to see how this situation could help me. "Sue me for what?" I asked Jim calmly. "I didn't do anything." "You are crazy." Carol screamed. "Sue you for all these leaflets and vile letters. I know your ego was crushed when I left, but you're already a loser." "Leaflets? What leaflets?" "You know, the ones that insult Jim and me." "Oh, those flyers," I laughed. "Can't handle the truth? I guess the truth hurts when you're nothing but a lying, cheating bitch and he's a bastard. I told the truth in the letters, but the leaflets are not my idea." "You're a liar," Carol shouted. "No, you lying, cheating bitch," I said, grinning. "And he's just a sneaky loser who can't find his woman. He must steal someone else's, like his friend's wife." "Yes, you." Jim began before Carol grabbed his arm and pushed him back hard. The big guy was furious, more than I've ever seen him before. I'm sure he would have hit me if she wasn't here. "You're a bastard," Carol told me. "Do you know that I lost my job? I got fired, damn it. And Jim has problems too. He had to change jobs, and that's not going well either. You need to stop this crap, Mark." I laughed. "I guess people don't want to be around a lying bitch, huh?" Jim's face contorted with rage. He was on the verge of losing control. "You stop this shit or I." He started again. "Or what are you doing?" I provoked him. "You will steal my wife and my family." "Oh, that's right. You already did it, freak. Just shut your mouth, loser." Everyone around us watched silently. No one expected a small guy like me to stand up to such a big guy. There were jeers all around, and the manager was heading towards us. I had to act quickly. "I'm serious, Mark," Carol warned angrily. "Stop this shit or else." I looked into her eyes and asked, "Has he started cheating on you yet, Carol? He has such experience, you know. Just ask Martha how." And that was the last word I managed to say before the big guy hit me in the jaw with his fist. A heavy blow threw me against the bar and almost knocked me unconscious. Before I or anyone else could react, Jim jumped over me and began beating me, throwing punches with both hands. "I'll kill you, you bastard," he shouted while I tried to fight back. It took 3 guys to hold him down, and Carol was screaming and crying at the same time. Someone called the police because they arrived within minutes. Of course, Jim was arrested for assault. He was led away in handcuffs, and Carol sobbed as she followed. They called an ambulance for me. I knew I'd be fine. but I allowed the medical staff to carry me away on a stretcher to make it look as bad as possible. They even took pictures of me while they were helping me. This was the fuel for my lawsuit. As you might have guessed, I hired the most ruthless lawyer I could find and filed charges against the bastard. Carol left me dozens of sobbing, and abusive messages. I couldn't be happier. It took a day before Jim was released on bail, but his job was in serious jeopardy. He was still new to his job and probably on probation. Having a big, drunken idiot on staff and a cheater to boot was not an asset to his company. After all the bad news, he was finally fired and was forced to look for another job. He never found a job. A month or so later, Jim was convicted of assault and even attempted murder. I did my best to include this charge. He served 3 months in prison, only on weekends so he could continue to work. But he had to pay a heavy fine and be on probation for several years. Carol was devastated. Her new boyfriend now had a criminal record, and finding work was even more difficult for him than before. My wounds healed quite quickly. Jim paid for my medical bills. I also filed a restraining order against him, another blow in my favor. I heard later that he was selling his house. It must have been difficult to pay the mortgage without a full-time job. Jim found part-time jobs for cash while he looked for work. Carol found another job, but it didn't bring in much money. The three of them moved into a cheap 2-room apartment to save money. Jim also got rid of his SUV. He bought a couple of cheap cars to get around. Life has become difficult. I let it all cool for a while. I continued to hire women to call home when Jim was away and Carol was home. Sometimes guys would call asking her when Jim was home. I tried to have them call when Jenny was at school or outside so she wouldn't be involved. I don't know if it was effective, but I hoped it was. My private investigator continued to follow up on the couple's work problems for me. When Jim was trying to get another job, I made sure his potential employers knew what kind of person they were considering. It took him months to find a job as a mechanic at some low-end auto repair shop. They hired other ex-cons there, so they probably didn't care about Jim's criminal record. Carol worked as a waitress at Denny's, but I'm sure she didn't make much money. By this time, I had saved up a lot of money. I also had a good income thanks to all the overtime I worked. I was saving at least $10,000 a month, which meant it was time to move on to the next part of my plan. When I heard that Jim was selling his house, I drove to his old neighborhood and drove past his old house, the huge one he had before all the problems. I was glad to see the "for sale" sign. Through my lawyer, I offered a low price for the house and was stunned when they accepted my offer. Apparently, the housing market wasn't doing well and they needed to get rid of the property. Within a couple of weeks, we quickly closed the deal and I moved. The house was beautiful. 4 bedrooms, 3 full bathrooms, formal dining room, and landscaped yard. I moved into the master bedroom, thoroughly enjoying the fact that this was where my ex-friend seduced and had sex with my cheating wife. It gave me a perverse pleasure to know that he would never again enjoy this bedroom or the rest of this big, beautiful house. I cashed out a few shares and started furnishing the house. To make sure of the perfect result, I hired a professional interior decorator. We met, and I explained what I wanted. She asked about the budget, and I told her that I would be very generous, but not wasteful. I wanted the house to look like a home, not a magazine showroom. I also asked her to use some photos of my old house as a reference for the decor. For more than $200,000 in furniture and decor, she did a great job. It had been several months since I had spoken to Jenny, and I missed her terribly. It still tormented me that she had chosen cheaters over me, but in the end my need for her companionship overcame my pride. I called her cell phone one afternoon when I knew she would be home. She couldn't contact me because my lawyer wouldn't give her my number. I hoped she still had the same number, and I was right. She probably had a caller ID and didn't know my number. I hoped she would answer anyway. Hello? Hello, Jenny. It's me, your father. Dad? Seriously? Yes, dear. I miss you very much. Sorry I didn't see you. I think I was too broken up about the divorce. I'd like to see you, if you don't mind. I can't believe it. Is this really you? Yes, Jenny, it's me, and I miss you like crazy. I miss you too. I thought you didn't want to see me anymore. This is wrong. I know I was a fool for not seeing you. I was just too upset about the divorce. But now I'm better. I would like you to come visit me if you have time. Maybe this weekend? Certainly. I need to ask my mom. She's really mad at you right now. I know. It's not scary. I just want to see you and catch up. Maybe we can go to a concert or something else you want. Fine. Let me call you back. Is this your number? Yes. You can call me anytime. Just hearing your voice is already a miracle. I love you, Jenny. I heard her sob as she said, I love you too, Daddy. She hung up and I was over the moon. An hour later, they called me again. You bastard, she said when I answered. Good to hear from you, Carol. You haven't spoken to our daughter for months, she reproached me furiously. The poor thing has almost stopped crying every night for you, and now her cowardly father appears again to break her heart. I won't break her heart, Carol, not the way you broke mine, but you're right. I want to see her. I need to see her. Long pause. Carol, are you still here? Yes. I want to see Jenny. How about this weekend? Is she free? Another long pause. Then, I think so. Great. What time can I pick her up? You really are a scoundrel, you know, Carol said. I hope you're serious. Jenny needs you, Mark. Are you going to get her hopes up, get angry, and disappear again, breaking her heart? No way. I've learned my lesson. I miss her, and I need her in my life. I can pick her up any time, Carol. Please don't make me beg. Fine. How about 6 o'clock on Friday evening? I hope you don't disappoint her again. No, at 6 on Friday. I'll be there. Thank you, Carol. Okay, bye. Goodbye. I've been preparing the house all week. Jenny was shocked when I picked her up in a black limousine. We hugged for almost 5 minutes. Carol watched us from the doorway with tears in her eyes. I didn't see the bastard, but I noticed that Carol was surprised to see the limousine. After the driver opened the door and put Jenny's suitcase in the trunk, Carol came over and squeezed my hand. You better not disappoint her, Mark. She had been looking forward to this all week. If you upset her, I will kill you. I wanted to say that she had already done this when she left me, but I remained silent. Don't worry, Carol, I said softly. Now that everything is settled between us, I just want to help Jenny in any way I can. She looked at me long and intently, and then returned to her small apartment. Jenny squealed with delight as we drove away. We had a wonderful weekend. Jenny was shocked to discover that her old home, where she lived with Carol and Jim, was now mine. I took her to a very fancy restaurant and let her order whatever she wanted. On Saturday, we went to a concert of some popular boy bands. I didn't know them, but a woman from work told me about them, and I got tickets. Jenny was delighted. On Monday evening, Carol called me again. Did you buy Jim's house? She cried in obvious frustration. Do you know that he lost a lot of money selling this house? He never wanted to sell it, and now he's really upset to find out that you're the one who brought the price down. So he thinks I deceived him, I answered, deliberately emphasizing the word deceived. Carol didn't miss the hint. So, life brings back, huh? She said bitterly before I could. Nobody forced him to sell, I reminded her. I heard it was a fire sale, so in a way I did him a favor by buying it. You're a cold, heartless bastard, Mark. I never thought you were like this. I wasn't like this before, I replied. I used to be a good, simple guy, quite trusting and naive. See where this got me. Then a couple of sneaky cheaters opened my eyes. Thank you for this. After a long pause, she hung up. Over the next few months, Jenny spent most of her weekends with me, and I couldn't have been happier. The house I had bought from Jim was now mine, and with her presence, it really began to feel like home. It was much larger and more luxurious than our old one. Even though I knew what happened here, I had no bad memories of this place. I simply forgot about who lived here before and enjoyed all the amenities. Of course, Jenny really liked everything. She told her mother how much fun she had with me. Jim spent his weekends in jail, but all week he had to listen to my daughter brag about how I was now living in his house and how beautiful everything was now. Carol saw how much Jim hated hearing it and asked her not to talk about it anymore because it upset him so much. It's a pity. A couple of months later, I took Jenny back. Jim was in prison and Carol was left alone. Last week, Jenny asked if her mother could join us someday, and I agreed that it would be nice. When I arrived, she ran down the stairs from her apartment. I took her bag and asked Jenny to invite her mom to dinner with us. She was delighted and ran back inside to invite her. A few minutes later, Carol appeared on the threshold with a gloomy face. She sent Jenny to the limousine to pack her suitcase and came up to me on the stairs. She looked at me with disbelief and asked, "What next nasty thing are you up to, Mark?" "No bullshit, Carol," I said honestly. "Jenny asked that you be with us sometime. I thought it would be nice. Despite all the bad things between us, I know that you are a good mother. You may not believe me, but I miss you." Carol winced. My words surprised her, and she turned away for a moment. "I know you're with Jim now. I understand. But time moves on, Carol. We used to get along well as a family, and Jenny and I would love to have you with us. If you'll be alone all this time, why not spend it with us? I promise, no tricks, Jenny will see everything." She tried to hide her smile, but she failed. "I don't think Jim will be thrilled about me going with you." "You're not coming with me," I reminded her. "Jenny will be with us, so no romance, and anyway, I'm too old for this. Just a nice family dinner and calm conversation. No pressure, Carol, but I think you'll like it." She looked at me intently and then sighed heavily. "Okay, I don't think anything will happen from dinner. Give me a minute." The evening went wonderfully. I have to admit, despite her betrayal, I still loved Carol. I just can't turn off this feeling like a switch, and I probably never will. She was a terrible, lying wife, and I knew there was no turning back. At the same time, I was a terrible father for leaving my daughter for such a long time. I admit, I still sometimes think about her fondly. Unfortunately, I can no longer trust her as a wife. But that doesn't mean I didn't enjoy her company that evening. I could see that the last few months had been difficult for her. She gained weight, her expression hardened, and the fine lines around her eyes and mouth seemed to deepen. But for me, she still remained beautiful. The most excited was Jenny, who chatted nonstop about how beautifully the house was decorated. While I was preparing dinner, she took my mother around the backyard and showed her all the updates: the updated deck, hot tub, gazebo, flower beds. She even told her about my plans to install a swimming pool. She then walked Carol around the house. I didn't witness their excursion, but when Carol returned to the kitchen, her eyes were full of tears. "You really did a lot with this house," Carol said over dinner. "How can you afford all this on an accountant's salary?" "I have no one else to spend money on." When a sympathetic expression appeared on her face, I quickly added, "And I made a few investments that turned out to be good for me. Glad you like it. I hoped you liked the decor. I wanted the house to be cozy." I looked at our daughter, who was devouring a piece of roast beef with gusto. Now he really is. After dinner, we ate apple pie with ice cream and drank coffee. I then took them out onto the deck and had a little fireworks show with the inexpensive fireworks I bought. It wasn't particularly impressive, but Jenny squealed with joy as they flew into the air, exploded, and burst into dazzling colors. For a few precious moments, it felt like we were a family again. Unfortunately, all good things come to an end. I invited Carol to stay with us for the night. I made it clear to her that she would have her own room, and there was nothing romantic in my offer. She politely refused, so I called her a taxi and sent her home. Work kept me very busy for the next month. I continued to make money from my investments, but stayed at work to prevent my mind from wandering over my lack of personal life. I could pay for sex to relieve the tension. But the truth is, I didn't need meaningless sex without romance. Self-pleasure was almost as satisfying and much cheaper. But mostly I wanted to build a strong relationship with my daughter, and if I could get along with Carol, so much the better. A call from Jenny one night shocked me. "Dad," she screamed, sobbing. "Jenny, what happened?" "This is Mom. She's crying. She's in the bedroom and won't let me in." "What's happened?" "They had a fight. I think she found out Jim was cheating on her. She's completely desperate, Dad. Can you come?" My predictions came true. This sneaky bastard showed his true colors. Where is he now? "They had a big fight in the bedroom," Jenny said, her voice shaking. I was so scared. Mom screamed at him. There were some sounds of blows. Then he went out and slammed the door hard. He swore as he left. "I'm scared, Dad." "Just stay there, Jenny. I'll be there soon." I called the police and reported possible domestic violence. We met at Carol's apartment and knocked on the door. My ex-wife responded after a while, looking terrible. Jenny ran into my arms. I hugged her tightly as she sobbed into my chest. "Thank you for coming, Dad," she said through tears. I was so scared. Carol went into the kitchen and sat down while the policeman asked her questions. I examined her for signs of beatings. She didn't admit to them, and I didn't notice any visible bruises. But that didn't mean he didn't hurt her. I asked the officer if I could talk to her privately, and he agreed. "Carol," I said softly, "are you in danger? Do you want to move in with us for a while until things calm down?" "Oh, Mark, I don't know what to say," she sobbed. "I don't want to be a burden." "You are not a burden. You will have your own room. Jenny will be with us too. We'll take care of you there. I care about you, Carol, and Jenny loves you very much. I don't want to leave you here with him. There were problems between us, but forget about it. I want you to be safe. Please come with us. Jenny and I beg you." "Okay?" She whispered so quietly that I could barely hear. I leaned over and hugged her. "Thank you, Carol," I said feelingly. "Don't worry about anything. Let's get some things together. If you forget something, we'll buy it." She sobbed again and then whispered, "Thank you, Mark." The police had to file a report. But since Carol did not admit to the violence, Jim was not brought in for questioning. He was lucky he wasn't called. He was still on probation for assaulting me and would have been sent back to prison. Over the next few weeks, Carol actually moved in with me again. She was devastated by her boyfriend's betrayal and broke off her relationship with him. We talked about this once. She said he cheated on her with a secretary at his new job. It was so typical of that bastard. He could never stop himself from cheating. Over the next few weeks, I did everything I could to provide a safe and loving environment for Jenny, and for Carol too. I knew she appreciated it, and Jenny couldn't be happier. She loved that both parents were now home every evening. Her mood improved, her performance at school improved, and so did her social life, as boys began to appear at our house occasionally. We had dinner together and sometimes went to the movies. I loved it when Carol cooked for us. Having a delicious dinner waiting for me at home was something wonderful. This forced me to leave work on time whenever possible. There was no physical intimacy between Carol and I. She was still depressed about her situation and now understood how I felt when she betrayed me. From the very beginning, I made it clear to her that we are just friends, but I want her to be safe. And with her presence along with Jenny, our home really became cozy. I found her a job with one of my clients. I bought her a car so she could drive to work and be a little more independent. She hugged me so tightly when I handed her the keys that we both started crying. Jenny came and we all hugged. We found an apartment for her nearby. Most of the money she received after the divorce went to pay Jim's bills and legal fees. She had some furniture that she had taken from Jim's apartment, but it wasn't enough, so I gave her some money for things she needed. I also gave her a coffee maker as a housewarming gift. Jenny was sad that she was leaving, and Carol said she would miss us, but it was time for her to live on her own. I agreed. Living with me would only mean returning to unpleasant memories for both of us. She needed a fresh start. The guy she was dating seemed pretty decent. Jenny said he treats her well and she loves him. I think this is the best I could hope for. When Carol left, Jenny and I became even closer. I think I depend on her as much as she depends on me. I watched her grow from a little girl to a sweet teenager, and then into a smart, responsible young woman. She is taking advanced courses at school because we have begun the process of choosing a university for her. She has good grades, and several universities are interested in her. She is a wonderful daughter, and I am immensely proud of her. My personal life is not very active, but there are several women who have expressed interest in the aging accountant. Sometimes I invite them home so Jenny can give her feedback. So far, none of these acquaintances have turned into strong romantic relationships, but I still hope that I will find my soulmate. Time will show. In the meantime, I am busy and successful in my work, and I'm enjoying the time I spend with Jenny before she leaves for university. I have to say that things turned out better than I could have expected a few years ago. Divorce is terrible, but life goes on. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think. Click to the next one. 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 Click to the next one.